Okay. Good evening and welcome. The time is now 5:30, and I'd like to call the May 30th, 31st, 2024 meeting of the Energy Facility Siting Council to order. Mr. Secretary, could you please call the roll?
Good. Kent Howe,
Here.
Cindy Condon,
Here.
Marcy Grail. I'm going to make note that Councilmember Grail has connected with me on text that she's on the audio. So I will note that for the record. Perry Choctoot. Ann Byer.
Here.
Richard Devlin.
Here.
Katie Imes.
Here.
You have a quorum, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Well, I have the following announcements. Comment registration cards for tonight's public hearings are available on the table in the back of the room. For council members and anyone addressing the council, please remember to state your name clearly and please do not use the speakerphone feature as it will create feedback. Please mute your phones, and if you are joining us by phone and receive a phone call, please hang up from this call and dial back in after finishing your other call. For those signed onto the webinar, please do not broadcast your webcam. If you want to receive future email notifications of council meetings, project milestones, or rulemakings through our Click Dimensions program, you can do so by clicking on the link in the agenda or on the council webpage. Look for the green box on the right-hand side of the page that says sign up for email updates. You may also sign up today on the computer near the entrance to the room. You're also welcome to access the online project mapping tool and any documents by visiting our website. These are also available on the computer near the entrance to the room. Please note that the audio and video of this meeting is being recorded and may be posted to the council's website following the meeting. Energy Facility Council meetings shall be conducted in a respectful and courteous manner where everyone is allowed to state their positions at the appropriate times, consistent with council rules and procedures. Willful, accusatory, offensive, insulting, threatening, insolent, or slanderous comments which disrupt the council meeting are not acceptable. Pursuant to Oregon Administrative Rule 345-011-0080, any person who engages in unacceptable conduct which disrupts the meeting may be expelled. So the first agenda item.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Can I make one announcement before we go into
Absolutely.
first agenda item? Thank you. I appreciate that. So I previously let council members know that our new compliance officer, Ash Woods, started on April 29th. So Ash is out in the region doing inspections. So she's been with us for a month. And so I wanted her to come out to tonight's public hearings just to see how the public hearings work, the council meetings work. She won't be here tomorrow. Otherwise, I would have brought this up in my council secretary report. So when we're on break or at dinner, you get an opportunity to meet her. So please raise your hand, Ash. So welcome, Ash. We are very, very happy to have her on board.
Right. Thank you. Okay, the first agenda item for tonight is the Boardman to Hemingway #2 draft proposed order public hearing, and will include first an information portion provided by Senior Siting Analyst Kellen Tardyweather, who will provide a brief overview of the agenda item, the amendment request, and the DPO, and a public hearing in which I will serve as the presiding officer. Ms. Tardyweather, are you ready to proceed with the information portion of the agenda item?
Sure. But I have an echo. Okay, just give me a minute here. For the record, Kellen Tardyweather, Senior Siting Analyst, Oregon Department of Energy. Have I been promoted to a panelist? Yes. Okay, and you're going to pass the ball to me? Or or do I just share my screen? Do I just take it from you? I'll take it from you. Okay. So, and then, Nancy, can you see, because I think that we checked the link to the webinar from the agenda online and it wasn't working. So, and I'm a little bit worried about some folks that I knew were gonna log into the webinar. Can you see if like Fuji and Jim Kreider, they're on? Okay. That was me. Okay. Okay. All right. Just making sure. Okay. Just want to make sure we aren't having a problem. So, okay. All right. I'm going to provide a presentation overview tonight on the draft proposed order on request for amendment 2 for the Boardman to Hemingway transmission line site certificate. And go over some of what is in the request for amendment 2, just kind of administratively as far the agenda tonight. We are having 2 hearings on a DPO. And there's a lot associated with both of them. In my presentation, I'm going to kind of go over the DPO and what is in the request a little in some detail, but I'm going to remind council at your June meeting, we will also be going over, we'll do a review of the DPO and the comments received in responses to those comments. So that's kind of coming up. But I'm going to move pretty quickly because I want to be mindful of the folks that are here potentially for the second hearing. And that I think we may have, quite a few people that would like to provide comment. So, but if I'm going too fast or if you want me to slow down, just wave your hand or throw something at me and I'll stop and we can go back and clarify any questions. So, maybe, is this going to work for me? Oh. Okay. And there's a little bit of delay with the presentation. And so this is kind of what I just went over. I'm going to talk about the overview. There are kind of some template slides that Chair Howell will go over in advance of the hearing. And then during the hearing, this is kind of the outline of the hearing. So the certificate holder will be provided to an opportunity to provide their comments on the DPO. And then the members of the public can provide their comments on the DPO. And then council has an opportunity to provide any comments or concerns they have on the DPO or RFA2. And then it finishes with the certificate holder having an opportunity to provide any responses to any of the comments received. And then we have kind of built in, which is now typical for most of our DPOs and our hearings, kind of a built-in opportunity for the certificate holder to respond to comments on the DPO. And we've just kind of lined out June 3rd, which is this Monday at 5 p.m. for that. However, the certificate holder could request more time or modify that at council's discretion. So council has received all the comments I have received to date, either via our online comment portal or via email. And the comment, and we'll go through that, but I just wanted to clarify, you've received it with a supplemental staff report and then just ongoing today because we've gotten a lot of comments kind of up till the last minute, and those have all been provided to council and also to Idaho Power, who's the certificate holder. So the Energy Facility and Siting Council, the review, that's a consolidated review for large energy facilities in Oregon. It is you folks here. This is kind of an intro slide for people in the audience that may be new to FSEC, but it's a 7-member volunteer group, governor appointed and Senate confirmed folks from all over the state. And we over here at the Siting Division at the Oregon Department of Energy are your staff. So we help guide you through the process. We help guide the public through the process and the materials. And then we also navigate other resources like reviewing agencies and consultants and working with applicants and certificate holders. So this is kind of our chevron for the amendment process. This is just kind of like high level, where we started and where we're at now. There's the box around the DPO phase. So for folks that are new, this is not, there's no decisions that are being made tonight. This is a hearing, and as we can see, we have more steps that we're going to complete along the way that are also going to be in front of council. So what is the facility? So the approved facility includes, this is 273 miles in Oregon of predominantly 500 kilovolt transmission line that crosses 5 counties in Oregon. That is the approved facility. We call it the ASC approved facility or the application for site certificate. It's the original transmission line that was approved in the ASC or the application for site certificate. Now, the approved facility, so, and I know that this doesn't, folks on the webinar can probably see better than us here in the room, but the map on the left, these are alternative routes that were approved in the ASC. So these are ASC approved alternative routes. And then, and so that all happened in 2022, we got final approval. And then 2023, we reviewed request for amendment 1, which included about, I think, 3 or 4 small minor route alternatives and some road alternatives. So those are what we call RFA 1 approved alternatives. And so these are, and so RFA 2 is very much kind of the same thing as RFA 1, except a lot more stuff. So these are kind of the big high level things that are included that the certificate holder is requesting council review and approve for the facility. So, and it includes a redefinition of the site boundary and micrositing areas, and then also expanding the site boundary. And I'm going to try to walk through that because this is conceptually, it's a little bit hard. So I'm going to kind of walk council through that, and folks in the room that are here to provide their testimony. So, and then similar to RFA 1, they're also adding additional micrositing areas. So additional route changes for the transmission line and for roads. And then they're also proposing to add in a midline capacitor station within the already approved site boundary in Union County, increase the width of temporary construction roads, and then amend language to site certificate conditions. So this is like how my presentation is structured. I'm basically going to kind of touch on each of these and tell you kind of where in the DPO we talked about it the most. So the scope of council's review for amendments kind of differs based on what type of amendment council's looking at. So your scope of review is a little bit different if it was an amendment that is extending construction deadlines. So because this amendment has several aspects to it, these are the questions that council, I always refer to them as the questions. These are the questions that you're answering or asking ourselves, or saying, does the certificate holder demonstrate this? So does the portion added to the site boundary comply with the laws and standards that would apply to an application? For every amendment, council is required to take a look at the bond or letter and credit and see if it is adequate, if the amount is adequate. And then does the facility with these changes comply to the laws that protect a resource or interest that could be affected by the change? Okay, all right, okay, so here's this is kind of a heavy one, and there's lots of words on here. So this is the redefinition of the site boundary and the micrositing area, which is also included with expanding the site boundary. And I have a bullet, there it is, there, little last one. Okay, so, and I have some maps. I'm going to go over this with words, and then I have some maps we're going to stare at to help, because I'm a visual person and I suspect that other people are too. So back at the ASC and RFA 1, the site boundary was equivalent to the micrositing area, which means that, and for most of the transmission line, that was 500 feet. So that meant that 500 feet is where the final transmission line would go, and all of that area was surveyed so that the certificate holder could then move or microsite the final right of way, which is about 200 to 300 feet, anywhere within that 500 feet. So site boundary equaled micrositing area. Part of RFA 2, they're saying we're going to separate those definitions. And this is very typical of what council may see with other energy facilities, like a wind facility, which might have a 40,000 acre site boundary, but the micrositing area where they're actually going to put facility components might be, 4,000 acres or something. Totally just making up numbers here. And there's various reasons for that, but we see this common. This is not a unique thing. However, because we've gone to this point with the application and definition this way, and now we're kind of separating it, it adds to kind of some confusion. So separating those definitions, and then they're saying we're going to expand the site boundary out to a half a mile for most of the facility, not everywhere, which means this is just an expanded area that is evaluated for potential resources. And then within that area are those micrositing areas that are 500 feet to move around that final transmission line that would be 200 to 300 feet right away. So in that site boundary, again, it would not be an approval to locate any facility components there. The facility components only get located in those micrositing areas. The site boundary is a bigger area that's evaluated for resources, and it has a nexus with other process steps in the council's process. So we're in definitions and terminology. So we'll look at it. So micrositing corridor means this is where facility components would be located within the micrositing corridor. That's also the area that we would be required to do all the necessary surveys, where an expanded site boundary area, we're not locating anything there. So we are satisfied with like a desktop evaluation for resources in that area. And then, and council traditionally permits flexibility within a micrositing corridor if a certificate holder and applicant demonstrate that all the requirements have been met for that area. And then I have this, council doesn't, and we have a write-up. It's in the general standard of review section in the DPO for this. It is interesting when you look at it, because most, projects or facilities that come in front of council typically say, yeah, this is our site boundary, this is our micrositing area, and we look at it and we evaluate it and we talk about it. But it's interesting because it doesn't really have a standard, right? So a standard that we would be looking at to then say, well, do they meet it or not for this request? So really, this request is, and like our recommendation in the order, is whether or not they've provided the information to demonstrate that they can apply those definitions that way. And we recommend that they do, because this is basically an information requirement. Does the preponderance demonstrate that they've provided the information to characterize the site boundary and to characterize and survey those micrositing areas? Okay, so let's see what does this mean? What does this mean? Again, map is not super huge. It doesn't really need to be. We don't need to see the details. This is a map from the ASC, from the application. This is where the site boundary equaled the micrositing area. And, well, actually, this is on Bombing Range Road, so it's probably a little bit more narrow, but let's say this was like 500 feet, okay? And so now this is the same area, the gray area right here. Can you see there's my mouse. It's not great. I wish I had a laser. The gray area along this is that previously approved, what we would call now micrositing area, okay? That's the previously approved site boundary, and we would say that's the previously approved micrositing area. And this big line over here is the expanded site boundary. So that is that half a mile here. This is a good. They're only proposing to expand the site boundary a half a mile on one side. They are not proposing to expand the site boundary onto the Navy property. So here you don't see it going out a half mile over there. So, and then part of this map too, we also have, so this is a map that shows you the expanded site boundary, the previously approved now, micrositing corridor in that site boundary. And it also shows you, these are some RFA2 micrositing area additions, or they're little road segments. We can see that they're just minor road changes. So this was an easy one. So now we're gonna kick it up a notch here. Over here, here's a map where, from the ASC, where the site boundary equaled micrositing area. And here, this is a little segment of the Morgan Lake alternative. That's what's right here. This is the Morgan Lake alternative. Site boundary equals micrositing corridor. And so here, our orientation's a little bit different here. Okay. But, and there's a lot going on here. So this is kind of confusing. If you're looking at it, you're like, you kind of have to stare at the legend and stare at the map for a while to kind of parse through what's going on. So here in RFA2, they're proposing a couple alternatives. So this is the Rock Creek alternatives, and these are basically alternatives for them to pick where to move, where to transition the ASC approved route down into the Morgan Lake alternative. So they're giving you a couple options. But then, so these are micrositing area additions. And then the yellow line is the expanded site boundary. So if approved, no facility components are going to go out here, right here, right? Wait, hold on, wait for my mouse, right there. No facility components, no roads, no transmission towers go in that expanded area. It's just an area that's evaluated. If approved, they would only be approved to locate the roads and the routes in the previously approved areas, micrositing areas, which are the two gray areas. And if approved, those two new route alternatives or micrositing areas. Okay, so I hope that helps. We can stop this. Council have any questions about that? Because we can talk about it at next meeting too, but I just want to make sure we're on this. Yeah.
Cindy Condon for the record. Just a question. You said that they're giving us, can you go back to that slide? They're, with the alternatives, they're giving us some alternatives. Really, we're evaluating the alternatives.
Yes.
We're not choosing alternatives.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
However, if it's possible, you could approve blank, blank, blank alternative. And then if one of the alternatives didn't meet a standard, you do have an option of saying, you know, approve blank, blank, blank alternative. And because this one alternative doesn't meet a particular standard for such and such reason, you could not approve one of the alternatives.
Right, but our job is just, does it meet the standard?
Correct. Right. Yeah.
Yes,
So,
okay.
yeah, not giving you, sorry,
Yes.
giving you the option.
Thank you.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank
yeah.
you.
Okay, so that is, separating definitions, application of definitions in council's rules. And then the second part is very similar to RFA 1. We're adding on alternatives. And this is very similar to RFA 1. They are adding on. They're not saying we're not going to do, like we're going to remove these as options. They are still just adding on options. So one of the ways that I like to discuss, I'm like, oh, obviously where's my notes? There we go. Okay. One of the ways we talk about it is that it's additive, right? They're adding on options for where to finally locate the transmission line. And when we look at that, we're also then adding on acreage, adding on site boundary. However, by logic, they're not going to build out all those routes or roads. It ultimately, the final design and final facility is going to be, it's going to shrink in actual impacts and acreage, and ultimately only one route or combo of routes will be selected. Right. So, and let me, here it is. So I think, I don't want to misquote it. So if all of the RFA2 routes were selected for construction instead of the portion of the route that they would be replacing, so if all of RFA2 routes were selected, the overall transmission line length would actually be reduced by 0.4 miles. So like almost a half a mile. It would be shortened if all of those were selected. So that's just kind of conceptually they're adding on, but ultimately it's only going to be one final route in a combo of routes that would be selected. This is a table It's just a snippet. It's table 2 in the DPO, starting on page 19. This lists out by county, the alternatives. Oh, I don't think I told you. I think it's 12 transmission lines. So it's similar to RFA1, but it's bigger, right? Bigger as in there's just more alternatives. Yeah, 12, like the 12 locations, 12 route variations. And this table does a good job of identifying the route alternative by name, but then also identifies other changes that would be micrositing area changes. Like, are they moving around a multi-use area, which is a construction area? Or are they, moving around or changing roads? And then it also provides a description for the addition, which the vast majority of these changes, the certificate holder says are from ongoing coordination with landowners about the final placement of the transmission line or roads on their property. And a result of just final engineering as well. So, they're proposing a midline capacitor station in Union County within the previously approved, what would be the micrositing area now, or site boundary. So this area has already been evaluated. It's adjacent to an existing substation. So capacitor banks, it doesn't have, transformers. It really is, it's a station that helps like move on long transmission lines, helps like load and move, like kind of push the power further to be able to carry it to its end destination point. And so there's a couple conditions. One of the conditions we recommended to change was this organizational expertise condition 1, which addresses kind of inspections and maintenance programs. For instance, this condition would require that the station maintenance program be like results of it be reported to the department. And that includes like monthly visual inspections of buildings, fences, electrical equipment, and annual infrared assessments for hot spots, and then the wildfire mitigation plan, like the provisions in the operational wildfire mitigation plan would, as applicable, would apply to the entire facility, which would include this capacitor station. And then kind of going back in time, when we looked at request for amendment 1, we said over there with the question of, hey, council, does the amount of the bond or letter of credit, does it look sufficient? And we had an evaluation there, because I think for RFA1, the route change was, very negligible. And we said, nothing changed. Council just looked at this. It's the same type of facility. Like there's no change. So really, we feel like the previous amount, which was $140 million, was still sufficient. Now over here, it's kind of has been a little bit of time. And so one of the things that we look at that we really like having are updated unit costs, because the unit costs were getting a little bit old, but really the trigger was that we now have a new type of facility component. So we really want to kind of reopen, we call it reopening retirement, and relook at it. We also pretty consistently at the department are using this kind of table spreadsheet. Applicants or certificate holders give us their retirement, proposal, and we kind of synthesize it and put it into this format. So we wanted to do that to kind of get it more up to date with the tables and how we kind of look at retirement, or how council's used to looking at it. So we did that. Certificate holder provided updated unit costs, provided costs for each type of facility and component and restoration. And so we went from Q3 2016 to Q1 2024, and the updated amount is now 170, and so $1 million. And so we recommended that amount is sufficient, and are made changes to the conditions that are just specific to updating that amount and tying it to the quarter and year. So the certificate holder is also, and this is also again, a result of getting into final engineering of the transmission line and roads. The certificate holders requesting a a wider width of temporary construction roads to be able to, basically get in the turning radius for some of the large equipment that would need to be delivered to some of these rural locations. So, so this table here, and I do have some red line. We have a strikeout of what it used to be. So here on new roads, that, kind of like the width, logically so, increases, the steeper the road gets. And for a maximum, which would be at a 30% slope, the road may need to be widened up to 120 feet. And again, that's for construction. They are not proposing to change the operational distance, which is 14 feet. So, let me see. Oh, yeah. And certificate holder explains that this, in that maximum of like a 30% slope, and the 120-foot wider road would only be on about 3% of the new and modified access roads. So in the DPO, we talk about this mostly in the soil protection section, and really the measures, and we are not recommending any conditions be changed because we looked at it and feel the conditions that we have would be sufficient to address any of the issues that we may see with this, which are, erosion and sediment control. And also does the reclamation and revegetation plan cover restoration of those roads to get them down to their operational width? And then there's also measures and representations in the road classification and access control plan that would cover this change as well. What is my, are we doing? Okay, all right. Okay, we're doing good. Okay, so as part of RFA 2, certificate holder is requesting modifications to conditions. And so here is a list of the conditions. Some of them are from the certificate holder. However, as staff to council, we also, when we have an opportunity to look at this, we are also making recommendations for some condition changes. Because, in our compliance program, and just as we are looking at things and realizing and working with reviewing agencies, sometimes we are seeing that there are duplicative or conflicting requirements. If we have an opportunity to, clean something up or have it make sense, we're going to take that opportunity. So here's a list of some of those, times that we do. And there's some conditions that the certificate holder, requests or proposes and it's included in RFA 2 in their red line site certificate. And we may take portions of it, but we'll tweak it and make it consistent with, condition language that we would normally use or that we think would be more easy to implement. So I'm going to touch just on a couple of these, but again, there is the list. They're talked about. These are provided. Anybody can see them in the red line site certificate, which is attached to the DPO. They're also talked about in each section. So this is consistent with one of the requests from the certificate holder, and we agree. So we're kind of in the certificate holder department and the Oregon Department of Agriculture kind of coordinated a lot, ongoing coordination on coming up with a mitigation plan for T&E plant species that would actually kind of work in the field and benefit potentially impacted T&E species like Lawrence milkvetch. And so ultimately, the Department of Agriculture and certificate holder did come up with this mitigation plan. It's included in the DPO. And so we're recommending changes to the condition that would then support doing that mitigation plan. Whereas the condition kind of, and I'm paraphrasing here completely, and Sarah's our resident expert on Lawrence milkvetch. So she can speak to it if anybody has any details. But the condition previously said, they'll do matting in the field if feasible. And it really wasn't kind of sufficient protection for, like avoidance. And so this mitigation plan really kind of gets into, real mitigation that may make a difference for the T&E species. So that said, then we have the wording over here with Fish and Wildlife Condition 7. We've updated it because if it was left as is, it would conflict with, if council approves the above condition, it would conflict with that condition. So we're kind of, those two work in tandem, right? So, and then we are making a recommended change to historic, cultural, and archaeological condition 2. So this is the condition, and I just got a lot of, and I'm sorry, Councilmember Imes, I know you're new and you're catching up with lots of terminology, and we love our acronyms, but this condition is the condition that requires the finalization and submission of an HPMP, which is the Historic Properties Management Plan, which is basically, it's the mitigation plan for historic, cultural, and archaeological resources. And what we did for this facility, because this facility has a Section 106 nexus, and they are going through the full Section 106 consultation, led by the BLM, working with the tribes and impacted parties. A result of the Section 106 is eligibility determinations for the National Register of Historic Places, or the NRHP. So the result of what comes out of Section 106 are final determinations, and what council said is said, okay, we will take your preliminary recommendations, and that HPMP can be finalized based on the outcomes of Section 106. And so that's what this condition says. Now, through Section 106, and what has happened since council approved the ASC, is the Section 106 is ongoing, meaning we're getting more resources are evaluated. We're getting more site-specific descriptions of potential impacts and of mitigation. So what's being, coming out of Section 106 are these PSMMPs, or property-specific mitigation and monitoring plans. And these are plans that are kind of specific to certain types of resources or bundling of resources. But where we're getting more and more specific. We have kind of a write-up on this kind of tangential or similar topic in the DPO about the work that ODF and W has been doing with the certificate holder on habitat mitigation, and where they're getting in their habitat mitigation plan. Like is before, when we approved it, it was kind of broad, and it's like, we're going to do this, this, or this. And now over in habitat mitigation, they're like, okay, we're doing this, and we're going to work with ODF and W, and that ball is moving. So we talk about the update over there. And so this is kind of a similar thing. We're getting more specific. Before, when council approved it, we had pretty specific, site specific and resource specific mitigation and minimization for impacts measures. And now we're kind of getting further along, where we're building these out into this longer documents and getting more details. So the changes to this condition are, I updated these appendix tables in the HPMP, but then we changed the condition to basically reroute and reference these PSMMPs, saying that, yeah, the mitigation that comes out that's talked about over there, since we know more now than we knew before, you can use that. You can use that information. So that's that. It's trying to capture the work that has been done since then. So that's kind of like super summary, a lot of information. Here is a little bit delay on the screen. Is my procedural history table really delayed? Anyways, all we need to know is that it's taken us about a year to get to this point. And a lot of that is from the information exchanges, and just by ongoing, as a certificate holder, is coordinating with landowners and doing final engineering. There's these things that kind of get added to the amendment, and we said, we're like, just add it to the amendment, right? So so that's kind of also why it's taken a little bit longer. And again, we just want to point out here that there are more steps to go. We're not at a final decision yet. Okay, so now I'm going to get into kind of talking about setting ourselves up for our testimony. So, and then I'll pass it off to Chair Howe. So the issuance of the DPO and the notice initiates the opportunity to submit comments in the DPO hearing. The public can submit comments via mail, email, fax. Don't forget about fax, and our online comment portal. They can also submit comments orally or in writing here at the hearing. It's been the hearing is scheduled to close at the conclusion of the hearing tonight, and it's been a 45-day comment period. Again, council's received, I might have received some via email. I'm not sure. I'll check, but council's received all the comments to date or since the beginning of this presentation. So council won't accept comments on RFA 2 or the DPO after the close of the comment period. And then, as I noted earlier, we're requesting that the council leave the record open to provide the certificate holder an opportunity to respond to comments, particularly because so many comments just came in today. So anybody that wants to participate beyond this point, after the hearing closes, must, raise the issue on the record, either in person or remotely at the hearing tonight, or by submitting a comment before tonight or at the hearing tonight. So failure to raise a relevant issue either orally at the hearing or in a timely manner precludes further participation in the process. That's why it's important. So persons commenting on the DPO and within the time frame are eligible to request a contested case proceeding. That's an opportunity when we issue the proposed order, which happens in a couple more process steps. For consideration in the contested case, issues must be submitted within the time frame, the comment period. They have to be within the jurisdiction of the council, and they have to include and be provided with sufficient specificity, which is to present facts, so that the council, the department, and the certificate holder are provided an opportunity to respond to that comment or to be able to understand and respond to that comment. So now we're going to just touch on, and we'll go over this again, like in the next steps. So this is the threshold compared to an application for site certificate, which has an automatic contested case. Amendments provide folks an opportunity to request a contested case. And the threshold is similar, but it's different. So council has to find that a request raises a significant issue or fact or law that's reasonably likely to affect the council's determination of whether the facility with the change proposed in the amendment meets the applicable laws or standards. And the council must determine whether the preponderance of evidence on the record supports that the portions of the facility added to the area by the site boundary, added to the area, complies with the laws and standards. We do have video. I mean, we have a lot of resources online, trying to help folks navigate, but there is just a short 10-minute video where we talk about this, available on the webpage. Now, when we get to that point, council does have options. So council can hold a contested case on the properly raised issue that could affect the council's determination that raised factor law, later on. We could, council can send the proposed order back to the department with a proposed change or a condition change that may address the issue. Or council can deny the request for contested case and then approve the proposed order as the final order. And that concludes my portion. So now I will pass it off to Nancy to run Chair Howe's slides. And thank you very much. I also want to thank in advance everybody who came tonight and who's called in. I really appreciate you folks coming in and all the questions and everything that I've gotten. It's been really awesome. So I appreciate people reaching out to me. Here to help. All right, you got it, Nancy?
Okay, thank you, Ms. Tardyweather. This is the public hearing on the draft proposed order on the request for amendment to the Boardman to Hemingway site certificate. I, Kent Howe, Energy Facility Siting Council Chair, am serving as the presiding officer for this hearing. Today is May 30th, 2024, and the time is 6:14 p.m. This public hearing is being held at an Energy Facility Siting Council meeting in person here in the Riverfront Room at the Port of Morrow in Boardman. This hearing is also being held via a WebEx webinar with a call-in option for those who cannot participate in person or via webinar. Tonight's hearing is being recorded. The presentations, written comments, and oral testimony are part of the decision record for the amendment request for the facility. The purpose of the public hearing is to provide an opportunity for the public reviewing agencies, council, and the certificate holder, if they wish to do so, to present oral and written testimony on the amendment request and the department's draft proposed order. The 45-day record of the public hearing comment period on the draft proposed order includes the hearing tonight and is scheduled to close tonight at the conclusion of the public hearing. Pursuant to OAR 345-027-0367 sub 5 A and B, please note the following. A person who intends to request a contested case on the proposed order for a site certificate amendment must comment in person or in writing on the record of the public hearing. And B, a person who intends to raise an issue that may be the basis for granting a contested case proceeding must raise that issue on the record of the public hearing with sufficient specificity to afford the council, the department, and the certificate holder an adequate opportunity to respond to the issue. To raise an issue with sufficient specificity, a person must present facts on the record of the public hearing that support the person's position on the issue. Please also note that in the Type A review amendment process, issues eligible for a contested case must be within the jurisdiction of the council and also must be determined by the council to raise a significant issue of fact or law that is reasonably likely to affect council determination of compliance with an applicable standard and the issue. So is that the, yeah, I think that's the next one. Okay. This slide presents the order for tonight's hearing and testimony on the record of the DPO. First, the certificate holder, then members of the public, then members of the council, and finally, the certificate holder will be allowed to respond to any comments. If attendees wish to submit written comments at the hearing to staff, they may do so prior to the end of the hearing. I will call on each person interested in providing oral testimony, starting with the certificate holder, then members of the public here in person, and then on the webinar, then on the phone. Next slide. There we go. For any individuals wishing to provide oral testimony during tonight's hearing, for the record, please state the following with your testimony. Full name with spelling, name of organization or group if you are representing one, physical mail or email address. So first of all, let's find out how many people are testifying. Oh, I got it right here. Thank you. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so I've got 3 here. Do we know how many are on the webinar and on the phone? So that's 5. So shall we limit the public testimony to say, what, 3 or 5 minutes? What does the council say? 5? Okay. So with that, is the certificate holder here tonight, and do they wish to provide testimony? Okay. So before I open the hearing up to public testimony, I want to remind the public that prior to the close of the record, you may submit written testimony in a variety of ways. The comment portal, email, and handing in your written comment tonight. And I want to emphasize that the written comments that come in, we read. And I know that we're putting a limit on the amount of time you have tonight of 5 minutes. use that time to highlight what you submit in writing, and that'll make good use of your time. So I'd like to get us, oh, we've done that. Nancy, what's saying? We got that. Okay. Okay, I'm going to call on John I'm sorry, I'm not Luciani.
I have a written statement.
Okay. Great. Thank you. This is not this is a one way to us for us to learn as opposed to us.
This is always the way it is. When is somebody going to answer some question for us? How many years is this going to go on before you guys answer our question?
You can submit questions into the staff and they will respond to you.
Okay.
Okay, second person, Irene Gilbert.
That John gives me his 5 minutes, or you allow me extra time, because I'm relying on his time to establish comments that are not, that were not provided in writing. And I do want to be sure that I meet your standard of establishing that if I were to choose to request a contested case, I would meet that standard. So I am going to start by saying, if I run out of time, I'm hoping that I can send in more written material, or however you want to deal with it. But I think you have an obligation to hear everything I have to say, since it's not a repeat of what you got in writing. Okay. Anyway, setting up the basis for a contested case request that we are doing here. My name is Irene Gilbert, and I reside at 2310 Adams Avenue, LaGrande, Oregon. I am co-chair of Stop B2H, the nonprofit, and I'm appearing today as a representative of the public interest, as well as myself as an individual. I do want to say that I had intended on putting my name on the material that Fuji Kreider sent in late. She was planning on being here today also, but didn't get the Stop B2H comments done in time. So given that I am co-chair of that organization, I am adopting by reference all of the material that came under Fuji and Stop B2H as an organization. Okay, on to some other things. I wanted to talk about blasting, because blasting is an issue that people have a lot of concern with. And I had a lot of concern when the site certificate condition was changed to remove the requirement that FSAC and counties review the blasting plan. And at the time, we were told that there wasn't going to be any blasting, so it wasn't an issue. So I dropped the issue. After that, Kellen told, or Tardyweather told Wendy King that there was not going to be any blasting for B2H, and that was in writing. I have a copy of that. Also, Mr. Stibble told Joanne, who's back here, that there wasn't going to be any blasting. So what I'm here to say is that because there supposedly is not going to be any blasting, I'm asking that the information about the blasting plan be either removed from the proposed order, or that the condition be replaced to have county review. Because for one thing, it was kind of demeaning, I thought, when the Oregon Department of Energy removed that review, saying they didn't have the expertise to review a blasting plan, and so they assumed that the counties didn't either. So that's number one. another thing is they remove the requirement that changes in roads when there's a road name to include the name of the road. So what we've ended up with is, there's over 30 pages of roads, and instead of having the names, on the roads that are being changed, they're numbered between 1 and over 650. So, it's like 33 pages. Now, there's a state law that says that material is supposed to be presented by agencies in an understandable way for the public to see it. And so I would just like to say that removing road names when they're available makes it pretty impossible for the public to tell what you're doing and where you're doing it. So I'm just asking you to put that back. The other thing is, sometimes what we say and how it really looks can be different. And I know, oops, I guess I'm going to be wet here. I know one of the things that was said in the draft proposed orders, it was stated that this really wasn't going to change things, that the surveys and that were going to just be exactly the same as they were. So we didn't have to worry. Well, this is a map of roads that are going through Union County. And it is true that the survey areas are going to remain the same. There's a heavy black line that goes through here. The only difference is the fact that they've added all this information inside all of this land to the site boundary, and they haven't extended the requirements to do surveys in any of this yellow areas. Now, that's a big deal because, for one thing, the EPO talks about the fact that developers can ask for a review if they want to make changes within the site boundary. Okay, they can, a developer can ask to add all kinds of siting corridors within the site boundary, and Oregon Department of Energy can say, yes, sure, you can do that because it's within the site boundary, and no, you don't have to have a public hearing. Well, that really conflicts with the standard that says there will be a public process and the public will have a chance to comment. When they change things, like for historic and cultural properties, and say, well, we're still going to only do this site boundary. We're still only going to do the siting route, the area that is what, 500 feet across or whatever. But we're extending all this extra area. And if they come back then and say, the developer says, well, we're now going to put more roads out in this area that's part of the site boundary. There's been no public process. There's been no information. There's been no opportunity for anybody in the public to disagree with that. And when you look at things like historic properties or like wetlands and things like that, and I encourage you to take a really careful look at these maps, because whereas the route may have been, 1,000 feet from a wetland, now the route may end up being 2 feet from a wetland. And at least in Union County, it means that the route can come right up next to Lad Marsh Wildlife Area. It can come right up next to some protected areas that are mitigation sites for the Columbia River dams. It can come right up next to Morgan Lake Park. And the public is not going to have a chance to be a participant in deciding if that really is okay.
Ms. Gilbert,
Huh?
thank you for your testimony. I gave you a couple of minutes extra. We've got other people that want to testify tonight and another hearing tonight.
Okay. Does this mean I get to send in the rest of there were several sticky issues that I did not do written comments because your rules say that I can make public comments. So can we resolve that?
The public comment closes at the end of the hearing tonight.
That's going to be a problem. No, I don't. I have notes. I have little notes here, but I clearly have issues that I intend on taking the contested case that we're not in writing because I also ran out of time. So you are denying me access to any kind of due process if I don't get an opportunity to come back. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Gilbert. Sam Myers,
Hello,
could you please state your name and address?
Sam Myers, 68453 Little Butter Creek Road, Hebner, Oregon. We are at the edge of the site boundary. If I had. This diagram shows B2H is the red, comes across. Morrow County designated this in a 18 survey of the county as a, oh, sorry, as a wildland or wildland urban interface, right? So at the time this thing was cited, this thing was on the map. The line comes away from the green energy corridor that everybody fought for. Got to have this green. After that, nobody cared. It zoomed right over to this wildland interface, right? That's the next place it headed to. There's supposed to be siting constraints that designation carries as far as projects like this. So apparently that didn't happen. Now the site boundary wants to expand, potentially impacting this even more. Now, I have a couple options, a couple things I want to drive home. To me, this expansion and the complexity tells me that Idaho Power doesn't have the operational, organizational expertise to pull this off. And this is a step because they couldn't figure it out before. It's very confusing, can't figure out what's going on. Now we have what appears to be a different amendment appeal process, this type A, which is like even easier to get citing approval for more amendments. I'm like, where's this gonna end? So this is close enough to my house, it kind of makes a difference. And Idaho Power hasn't talked to me in any way, shape, or form since OPUC ended. So they have, in my opinion, a lack of interface with the landowners. And I see that, I heard Kellen talk about a little interface. I don't think there's enough because I think it's out of their wheelhouse. They don't have this, the manpower, they don't have the dedication to deal with landowners in a real way. Why would you have so many options up on the board? I'm gonna go here, I'm gonna go here. We got this site boundary bubbles off on this side or over here. What the heck? There's no way they can just like talk to people, figure it out months ahead. I've been talking to Nextera for over a year on a road revision. We were able to figure it out. We stayed with it. But this group likes to do this, use amendments. So what am I to expect ultimately? At some point, this thing crowds into this 500 feet and then they want to go more. I don't know. So someday I wake up and they're like putting a line, what, 500 yards from the house or something? And they're like, well, we got another amendment that we did and we got that pushed through. And so here you are, Mr. Myers. We need to carve out some space here. This is going to be, it's kind of close, but you'll be all right. I don't know. This is so confusing. Miles and miles. Okay, I got a minute left here. The other thing is, okay, Helen, you talked about a road being like 50 feet wide. I talked with the Morrow County Weeds guy and he was having a fit because there's all these roads and Idaho Power doesn't care. They just dump responsibility on Morrow County. Just dump, hey, you take care of all these roads we're gonna make. But now in some places, we're gonna make them even wider. Okay, what? You just took a road, made it 40, 50 feet wide? Really? How's that gonna impact the noxious weed control? You just doubled or tripled the miles, you make them wider, they're way harder to control. You turn an area of the edge of the road from 3 or 2 feet maybe on each side. Now you gotta control what? How much? Okay, where's the plan? Where's the impact of Morrow County Weeds Guide? They're just like, oh, well, Morrow, they'll take care of it, right? But they had to negotiate for months to get a plan for the old site certificate. Now it's like, what, you're gonna carve off a mountain somewhere and make it 50 feet wide? And so you got a bank there that's like 30 feet of rock and crap laying down? Is somebody gonna get down there and spray all that? This is a mess. And it makes me, it's really frustrating, because we're on the ground right there in the middle of it. And I don't know what they're gonna do. And I'm in a wild, this is like a little bit of a populated area, okay? It's not like a city. I get that. But what's all this road expansion gonna do in that area? And are they even, in the end, are they even gonna stay in the original site boundary?
Okay, thank you for your testimony, Mr. Myers.
Yes, and I do have this in addition to an email, so I would appreciate you read that.
Yes.
And I guess I would like to call for a contested case, and I would love to reserve the right to talk about the OARs or the ORSs at that time. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mr. Myers? Yeah, I just want to make sure I understand. If you want to reserve the right to request a contested case, you need to make your comments before the close of the hearing today. So if there are still issues that you want to raise that you didn't raise in writing, then you should bring them up now. Have you raised all the issues that you want to raise?
Yeah, plus the OAR and the.
That's where I'm getting lost. When you say plus the OAR,
Well, I'd like to
that-
bring up those rules as well.
yeah, I think we only have 5 people that are wanting to testify.
Just in general, I'd like to be able to reference those rules is what I'm saying.
Are you prepared to do that now?
No, I'm not. I'm prepared to reference those in time.
Okay.
That's why
Yeah, you have until the end of the hearing. That's the deadline. You understand that?
I can't reference that I want to use those right now
Well, we would,
without going into detail about it.
we would
Is
need
that
at
what you're
least,
saying?
we would at least need to know which OARs and ORSs you're alleging are potentially not being complied with.
Right. Yeah, I get it. I don't have that for you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Myers, for your testimony. We have a Joanne Harris Road. Sure.
Good, continuing. I've been called the conservative environmentalist by friends of mine, and one thing I didn't comment on was the Eagle surveys and the problems with Eagle surveys. And I just wanted to say that the surveys are not adequate, they're not a wide enough area. And what I'm submitting today in writing for you to take a peek at is surveys that were done for the Antelope Ridge and Elkhorn transmission sites where they did surveys for eagles. And the first one is copies these areas overlap with B2H site area. First one is some nests that they found. The second one is a map of some eagles that were, they tracked them and they're basically flying within a 6-mile area. So it showed some of those eagle flight areas. The third one is some of their results from site studies of eagle visual encounters with eagles. They run between 2 and like 35 sightings per location. And those locations are on this map with the numbers. The other one I wanted to comment on is cultural surveys. This has been a big deal for a long time, and I noticed that you're planning on removing the requirement for cultural surveys that are required by Oregon's rules and statutes, which require not just the review of the federally listed protected sites. For Oregon, on private property, they're also supposed to look at locations and objects in addition to just the registered like historic properties. So that's going to be a big issue because you're not complying with Oregon laws. It's always been a big issue, the reliance on the federal rules as opposed to kind of ignoring the state rules. It's been a problem because the developer is looking at just where the transmission line is damaging things as opposed to the indirect impacts. And I know at one meeting that I think it was you, Cynthia, were told that when the transmission line goes directly over the old Oregon Trail, it's not considered a direct impact. Those kinds of things are problems. I just read that the problem apparently goes beyond just here. The federal Department of Interior is going to review and take a look at the B2H project in terms of problems with their cultural surveys. It just came out. I would say that probably people like me saying we want to see what the feds are going to do with this programmatic agreement hopefully has gotten the attention of somebody in Washington, D.C. because they are going to review it. The other thing I wanted to comment on real quickly is anyway, I could go on and on with cultural surveys. There are problems with not giving specific details about what the mitigation is going to be, on and on and on. I went through the changes in the site certificates. When they change from the site boundary to the micrositing corridor, obviously that's a big deal. They're not requiring mitigation for avian fatalities that are not within the site boundary. They've changed the historic properties management plan to rely on the federal one. They are not notifying ODFW if there are changes to the fish passage that occur within the site boundary. Now they're only looking at the micrositing area, so there are no indirect impacts being reported. They're not requiring subsurface soil and geological conditions beyond the micrositing area. The rule specifically says that they're supposed to look beyond that siting area into the area surrounding it. That are, let's see, I went on and on. Wildlife surveys are being limited beyond what the rules say, which I think it's a half mile for habitat that they're supposed to look at. They're not going to do that. It's half a mile beyond the site boundary. They're now looking at just the siting corridor. Let's see, they're not doing pre-construction traffic studies on sage grouse, so they have nothing to compare with when they decide if there's traffic impacts to sage grouse. They've removed the pre-construction requirements for surveys of bats. I did do a written report on this because bats are nocturnal. And if you're thinking that they're going to identify bats by just wandering through during the day, it's
Hey,
probably
Ms. Gilbert,
going to happen.
going to have to cut you off.
And I could continue, but obviously there are a lot of problems with the changes. I hope you really pay attention.
Okay, thank you for your testimony. We have anyone else in the audience present to give public comment tonight on this item? Okay, and Nancy, could you check the phone and the webinar?
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you. Could you state your name and address?
Yes. And there'll be two people speaking from this recording. My name is Fuji Kreider, FUJIKREIDER 60366 Marvin Road, LeGrand, Oregon. Tonight, I am here representing the Stop B2H Coalition, which is a nonprofit public interest organization with over 1,000 individual members and 8 organizational members representing thousands of additional individuals. I'm sorry, I'm getting feedback. Did you have a question?
Nope, it sounds
No.
okay at this end.
Okay, sorry. Thank you. I think at first I better interject that I will concur with Irene Gilbert that her comments, our written comments officially from the Stop B2H Coalition, which were sent to Kellen earlier, should have been included in Irene Gilbert's written testimony as well. She is the Stop's co-chair. I'll just put that in there, that we concur with her testimony earlier. Our comments are in writing with, I hope, specificity enough to reach your bar. Tonight, I'll just comment at a little bit of a high level, given the interest of time. I just want to say first that Idaho Power's latest amendment rendition, request for Amendment 2, is a wolf in sheep's clothing. An expansion of a site boundary from 24,000 acres to 96,000 acres. A 300% increase is striking. Stop completely objects to the whole premise of this land grab schema created by Idaho Power. It is filled with terminology obfuscation without legal foundation. The company is trying to strategically position themselves, even gaming the FSAC rules on amendments, to either cut corners or violate landowners and the public's due process rights for the future by using ADR or administrative determination requests, something like that, ADR processes, which are a shortcut process in the future. The company is also gaming the public and public officials by not providing adequate maps from which the person could meaningfully participate and for landowners to even understand what's happening on their land. All of this to mask the fact that the request is it's just massive. And Stop believes that its intent is really to speed up sensitive negotiations with landowners in order to cut corners and cut the landowners out of the process. Stop urges council to either deny RFA 2 or remand RFA 2 back to Idaho Power to complete their landowner negotiations and engineering design changes, adopt the Stop B2H recommendations of conditions herein, they're in the writing, which we believe will be more protective of the landowners and the public, and to allow Idaho Power to return with more realistic amendment requests that are specific to changes in parcels or facilities that are inside or outside the already approved micrositing corridor, as was done in RFA 1, while using the Type A amendment process that demonstrates compliance with all of the FSAC's rules and standards. That's our request. And I have one more, and I guess it's a formal request on the record here tonight that there may be an extension for even a few days, if not a week, for the people who have not been able to fully put their writing to you. And for example, Mr. Myers, who just testified, if he could send you the rest of his stuff tomorrow, we would request an extension past this hearing this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kreider. Was there, Mr. Kreider?
Yes, there most certainly is.
Okay, and state your name and address, please.
Sure.
Nancy.
Jim Kreider, 60366 Marvin Road, LeGrand, Oregon. And today I'm speaking just as me, not as Stop B2H, because don't want to take more time since the organization got their 5 minutes. But I kind of want to speak kind of more openly. And first, I'd like to apologize to the staff, because at your last meeting, I stated that the staff had all the KMZ maps that Idaho Power had in the map sets. And I was incorrect, and I apologize for speaking out of turn there. Because that is one of the issues that you'll see is significantly brought up in our filing, is that the maps are not capable, as currently presented, to give landowners adequate information to make informed decisions about the impacts of this transmission line on their land. And I go into some detail showing you screenshots of what's available, doing comparisons, and give you a quiz to find a certain preserve and put it together in its whole. So the maps have some issues. There are solutions. So I hope that you'll listen to us there. I also feel that our processes now have a rush to build. And I know the agency is under pressure to improve and speed up the siting process. There was earlier mention of other agencies becoming more efficient to FSAC's requests. And that is because of your work to get them funded, to have people in those positions to do the work that's required by law. The problem is we came in before those people were in their positions. So kind of some things that should have been done didn't get done. And we talk about that in threatened and endangered species. I would also, landowners are not NIMBYs. They're conservationists. The people, the landowners that are pushing back truly care. One of the landowners I'm working with, he's choosing, he's offering to move the line away from Morgan Lake Park so that individuals are not impacted and certain cultural artifacts are not disturbed. He's taken a hit on his land, putting it in the middle of it to preserve something. He's a conservationist. Meanwhile, another neighbor that I had worked with Idaho Power, proposed an alternate route within the new site boundary. Idaho Power came out, had the laptop, walked, GIS'd, mapped the area, sent back maps saying, okay, how's this look? And then last Thursday, they called this landowner, Idaho Power's in-house attorney, and said, hey, I need an offer by tomorrow. And by tomorrow, I need to know what discount you are willing to offer me on the rate we will pay you for the easement. And it was not a percentage, it was a fixed value. And the assessments for the land had not been done yet. And I have some more information on that. But Idaho Power sent to these neighbors, these landowners, 2 weeks prior, a good neighbor letter explaining how this process was good for them and that they should support it. Meanwhile, this is what they're doing. And Idaho Power is telling you, oh, the landowners want this. Have any of you asked for any names? Any numbers? Is it one landowner or is it 10 landowners? We don't know. When I have asked Idaho Power for this information, it is privileged information between the company and the landowner. Boom, door closes. So I also know that this is outside of your jurisdiction. That's what we've been told from talking to staff when we talk about Idaho Power, their fancy footwork, their bullying. But with what they're doing is the people are just what you're doing by saying this is none of your responsibility. You're leaving the people to hang out to dry and let a corporation blackmail them. And my suggestion to you is if you want to represent the citizens of the state, that you will deny this request and that you will vote in favor of a process that is involving the public from the get-go. You guys do a good job, but I think there is a better way to do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kreider. Okay, Nancy, is there anybody else on the WebEx?
So Wendy King, you have your hand raised. I'm going to go ahead and unmute your mic, Wendy. You're ready to make a comment.
Ms. King?
The Myers family. I live at 1337 Southwest Pumice Avenue, apartment 303, Redmond, Oregon, 97756. There are a number of site certificate conditions that I do not understand and how they will affect my family. I would ask that the council extend the public comment period for further study of these changes, because I don't have enough time. It seems to be a common theme, and I think a expansion of the time that we need to have public comment is appropriate. The RFA2 transmission line alternatives have been requested and approved by landowners, and that's great. Idaho Power would have us believe that the expansion of the ASC approved site boundary is an effort to streamline additional landowner requests. However, the recent letter titled B2H Update by Idaho Power states, we will make these changes only when landowners request them or they're necessary for engineering or construction purposes. Their language leaves the door wide open to make changes based only on Idaho Power's needs. Because Idaho Power has had their shot at engineering B2H for years and achieved their certificate, it seems unimaginable that they have further adjustments that weren't accounted for in the original approved route, especially the midline capacitor station. The correction to road widths is another reason to contemplate their ability to design and construct a transition line facility. This very issue shows to me either the lack of accurate engineering or a total manipulation of the site certificate process to work in their favor. I am also concerned about blasting because the plan may be amended to add it back. And ODOE has to reflect what FSAC have approved the original site certificate. Had this amendment been part of it, our family and already asked for a reroute in April of 2023, and we were given no consideration. Since then, there have been no landowner consultations with our family. I'm concerned about the Bald Eagle passage up Little Butter Creek that B2H crosses, and now this is impacted by changes possibly to site certificate conditions. I am very concerned that Idaho Power will use the amendment determination request, ADR, to achieve their own refinements for engineering and construction purposes alone, leaving landowners out of the process. I strongly suggest that the FSAC require all ADRs be approved by the landowners and the public that will be impacted. Expanding the site boundary with the possibility of moving the transmission line over additional areas of our farm has the potential of adversely impacting our multi-generational families. The revised route may result in unacceptable noise levels at our homestead, may be strung over our high-value cropland, impacting the great horned owls reside in our hay sheds, and may justify carving additional roads through our homestead location. If this is allowed without adequate studies, it may impose significant changes to our accepted farm practices and significantly increase the cost of accepted farm practices like aerial chemical application and movement of products from field to storage and market. By allowing the expanded site boundary, Idaho Power may justify moving the line through yet more fields and disregard the usual constraints of siting along the edges of fields, existing roadways, or natural boundaries, rather than through existing fields, because they only have to show they did so generally. The ORS 215.275 does not require the complete avoidance or elimination of impacts to accepted farm practices. Idaho Power can simply move its transmission line within yet another of our fields, as they did in the original siting, and we have recourse to advocacy is land added to our condemnation trial. Concerning historical, cultural, and archaeological resources, The Bartholomew Myers Farm is a historical resource. It was adopted into the Century Farm and Ranch Program, CFR number 1093, and NRHP eligible criterion A. The original CFR application completed in 2005 reflects, while farming challenges remain, all of those on the farm enjoy the beautiful countryside and respect the great heritage that we have on Myers Bartholomew Farm. The B2H approved route north of our homestead is already an eyesore in the viewshed of our historical farm. If B2H were to be relocated closer to our homestead, we would contest. We formally request access to the confidential attachment S10 intensive level survey, visual assessment of historic properties report in Exhibit S of the original B2H application, as it includes our property, how it was studied, and how the line relocation may impact the results. I'm out of time. Echo on?
Okay, Ms. King,
Yes.
are your comments in writing?
Yes, I have.
Can you email them? Oh, we've got them. Yeah, okay. I think, right. Yeah, okay. So we've got your written comments. I'll give you like 30 more seconds to highlight anything in your written comments that you wanted to note.
Okay, the last one is that my statement is that Idaho Power is solely responsible for jeopardizing the hard work, engineering, and coordinating with landowners, the 12 transmission line alternatives, by adding the request for an expanded site boundary at a late stage of the RFP. Idaho Power further, if RFA 2 is denied, landowners would lose everything they've worked with Idaho Power to include in RFA 2. By brokering the addition of an extended site boundary to RFA 2, Idaho is attempting to capture 2-for-1 amendments in FSAC with one fell swoop, playing off of community support for landowners. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. King. Okay, Nancy, others on the WebEx?
I do not see any other hands raised at this time.
Okay, shall we go to the phone then?
Just to remind the call-in users, if you are wanting to raise your hand, you're going to press *3 on your telephone keypad. That will raise your hand, and you would press *3 again when you're finished commenting to lower your hand. There are no hands raised at this time.
Okay, and no one else in the room wishing to testify tonight? Okay, from the council, anyone? Any counselors have comments? Yeah, Councilor Byer.
I just want to thank everybody who came out tonight and who are participated on the phone. This is a very complex project, and kudos to all of you who've been hanging with it this long. So thank you for your comments, and the ones that are submitted in writing, all the council members receive and we all read them. So thank you for that extra effort.
Thank you, Councilor Byer. Councilor or Vice Chair Condon.
Is it appropriate for me to ask a question of one of the people who testified today?
A clarifying
A
question.
clarifying question. Yeah, Ms. Gilbert. Oh, you are still here. You mentioned that blasting wasn't considered before, but we did consider it, and I don't see anything in this RFA that changes that. So I'm trying to hone in on the blasting.
what happened with blasting is the initial site certificate had the process for review of the blasting plan that included participation from the counties and that input during part of the process. For RFA 1, the draft proposed order stated that because FSAC or because Odo did not feel that they had the expertise to make decisions about whether or not the blasting plan was appropriate, they removed the requirement that the counties, and they didn't feel that the counties that anybody had the expertise to look at this blasting plan and give input. So they removed the review requirements. Now, I had a problem with that, but was assured that there wasn't going to be any blasting, so it wasn't going to impact anything. Well, and they also, had told people in the public that there wasn't going to be any blasting, so it wasn't going to be a problem. Well, blasting is still in the site certificate. And at this point, from everything I can tell, Idaho Power is not continuing to say that there will be no blasting. So now we're left with Idaho Power deciding what they're going to do with blasting, what their safety is going to be, who's going to do it, without any influence or input from the counties or the special advisory groups, or actually for the Oregon Department of Energy. They're just supposed to turn in the report after they're done, basically. So that is a problem.
Okay,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
yeah. Counselor Devlin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had a question actually for the applicant. Would like them to respond to. I'm sort of like in the same position I'm in with my family. I'm the 8th of 9 children. So with the exception of Ms. Imes there, I'm the newest person on the council. So I haven't been on that long. I think I was selected this because of my background in energy issues, background in land use and background in siting issues. I don't know exactly what the process is here for Idaho Power, but I'm thinking about it in a similar way that I would think about, because I have some background in that area, siting road facilities and highways, where you go through a process where you select a possible corridor, you study that corridor. It might be relatively large, actually. And corridors tend to upset a lot of people because they have a relatively large impact. Then probably when you get close to selecting preferred corridor, you probably start preliminary engineering. And then when you actually get closer and closer to approval of everything, and you're actually going to start putting in a timeline for actual construction, you get to the final design and engineering basis. Is it similar in this case, or could you describe it?
Yeah, I do have some public comment that will kind of walk through what our intention of the expanded site boundary is. But yes, it is. We've gone through final engineering. We've worked with individual landowners on some of those changes, which is why we had changes to where those access roads are. But I do have kind of an explanation of what our.
The reason I make the comment is because my experience has been is parties don't go into the final engineering design until they're assured of what route they're going to have, because that can very much impact what engineering has to be done.
Absolutely, that is true.
Okay, that was my question.
Hold on just a minute before you give your comments. Any other council members? Councilor Imes.
So also, Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to make the comment that I noticed tonight there were several comments about the public comment period, and how people didn't seem to think they had sufficient time for that. And it's my understanding that we're giving 45 days from the time that those materials are released till this evening, correct? And so I'm just kind of curious about how long, what is the expectation? Because how long does it take to review the materials? I mean, I'm, as a council member being new on this committee, I have 2 weeks to review everything. So it's a very short period of time for the council. But as far as comment period, I mean, the materials are being released and then you have 45 days to comment on those. So if anybody in the future wants to submit further comment about the comment period timeframe, that would be helpful for, I think, the council and the department. Because we keep hearing that over and over again. Thank you.
So, Mr. Chair, for the record, Todd Cornett. 2 things. First, we do have 2 outstanding requests for time extension. So Ms. Kreider and Ms. King have requested time extension, so that will have to be evaluated and responded to and determined by council. I think probably before we get into the responses by the certificate holder. And then also, Councilmember Grail would like to make a statement. So if you can.
Counselor Grail?
Hi, thank you, Chair Howell, Vice Chair Cotton, and members of the council. To members of the public, I just want to apologize for not making it in person. I was not able to traverse the state of Oregon quickly enough today. I've been listening, and I just wanted you all to know that due to my previous employment at PacifiCorp, I am recused from participating in any activities related to the Boardman to Hemingway project. However, I am able to participate and listen, but I will not be taking any action. So I just wanted to put that on the record and remind everyone of such. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Grail. I have one other item as well. Let's see, Council Rowe, there was the Mr. Myers brought up. He wanted to cite some statutes and rules in order to make a case for a contested case process. Is it appropriate for me to ask before we close the hearing if he was able to come up with the statutes and rule citations that he wants for the basis of his contested case?
Yes, you can ask him that.
Okay, Mr. Myers? Were you okay, perfect. So we don't need to go down that path anymore. We're done with that one.
Sounds
Okay,
like we don't know.
good. And then back to the extension of time, where's the council as far as adding time to the deadline for turning in comments?
I'll just quickly remind you that the standards you apply on requests for extensions of time are a good cause standard. So is there good cause?
Yeah.
Have the people requesting the extension explained a good cause for providing such an extension?
Vice Chair Condon?
Thank you, Chair Howell. Cindy Condon for the record. And this is more a statement. It's not a statement of good cause or anything, but at our last hearings, there wasn't a time limit. And I'm wondering if there's some confusion about I'll be able to speak my piece, not having it written down, if that gets confusing to people and could be a confusing factor for providing written comments versus oral comment. And just something that I think could affect people who are coming to give oral comment, don't have time to finish, and want to hear the hearing. So they can't do 2 things at once. So just a complicating factor.
Yeah. Yeah, so let's have a little discussion of good cause. 45 days has been the time to tonight. Councilor Byer?
So this is just an observation that sometimes when we get to the public hearing, An individual will raise an issue and another individual will say, gee, I wish I had thought of that, or that also leads me to think of this issue. So much like we are processing all this new information and getting people's ideas, there may be some of that feedback from different members of the public. I don't know if that rises to the level of good cause. I do agree with Vice Chair Condon's observation that you come to a meeting expecting to be heard and all of a sudden you have 5 minutes. And perhaps that's something we as a council can do when we put out our agendas, is remind people that time may be limited. Just for those members of the public who came here, written comments are really helpful because then we can review them again. I can be busy taking notes about what you're saying, but I may not accurately capture all of your intent. So just for me, I'd encourage written comments. Because this is such a complex case, I don't know again if this rises to good cause. And I know that if we even grant 24 hours extension, it bumps into other timelines. So, you know, looking at staff to see what that does to your timeline, we know the applicant also gets a chance to respond. We don't want to bump the timeline that far out, but just interested in what others think.
Vice Chair Condon.
Cindy Condon again, and correct me if I'm wrong, our next meeting is in pretty short order.
Yes.
2 weeks. So, you know, I realize that's an issue too, particularly for this issue or this hearing.
Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Devlin.
On this issue of setting time limits, I think at some of our previous meetings, we've had like 2 people that wanted to testify. There's another side to this also, and that is when you have about an hour, hour and a half set aside for testimony. If you don't put in time limits and you end up with 40 people wanting to testify, you've got a lot of people that are very disappointed that they never had the opportunity to testify. I don't know, Mr. Secretary, if we've got anything in writing that says that, subject to time constraints, the council can limit the time for testimony. We don't have to have it, but I mean, I've seen some organizations that actually have that in their directions for meetings or in their materials that go out to the public.
Yeah, I'm not aware that we have that in our rules. I agree with Councilor Byers' suggestion that in future agendas, we should let folks know that, you know, depending upon how many people show up to testify, that you may be time limited.
Yeah. That's what I've seen in other organizations. I'd still like to hear from the applicant, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, we plan to. We're coming up to that, but we got to get through this first. Because the applicant has a time limit in responding to tonight. Okay, any other discussion? Where are we as far as coming up with good cause after 45 days?
Yeah.
Councilor Imes?
Sure. Do we, so I didn't get any explanation from the commenters tonight about any good cause. So I feel like for me to make a decision, it's like you have to go off of what's already been commented on, and that hasn't been presented.
I believe Ms. King said that she just wanted more time to better understand the conditions. But if you would like the folks who have asked for more time to further explain why they need more time, why the 45 days wasn't sufficient, you can ask them to do that.
Ms. Gilbert? Come forward. We'll give you 1 minute.
I think I did state the reason that I needed more time either here verbally or in writing because as far as reviewing, there was over 800 pages of material, plus we had to go back to the original site certificates in those conditions because a lot of what happened with RFA 2 referred to RFA 1 and the original. So it is very complicated trying to sort through this stuff, but just in terms of the public hearing here, your notice said that the public has an opportunity to provide their comments in writing or at the public hearing. And so without telling us that we were going to be limited to a certain amount of time, obviously, I did not do a good job of presenting the issues that were not in writing. I would really like to have the time to send those to you in writing so that you could understand the full scope of why you heard those comments, in particular, the ones that I didn't send in the comments that I made here verbally, with the exception of one area I talked about. So
Okay,
that's
thank you.
my reason why I think, yeah,
So you did submit comments.
I
And
submitted comments.
you're saying now you want to submit more comments.
I'm saying I submitted comments on some issues. I did not submit comments on I didn't send written comments that were consistent with what I planned on saying tonight here, or the topics that I planned on speaking to tonight here that would support a potential
Okay,
future.
well, and I just suggest, as many of the other council members have already, that the written comments are so valuable. Of course, being in person is a wonderful thing because, you know, this face-to-face interaction is so important. But also the written statements is what we are going to go back to and read over and over again. So I'm still trying to find good cause here. And I'm not sure I've found that tonight because you've had 45 days to review and you've already submitted one set of comments, but now you're saying you need more time to submit more comments.
There were additional issues that I did not have
Ms.
the
Gilbert?
time to write up, that I gave in written.
Ms.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Counselor Imes. Discussion by the council.
Mr. Chair, I think you need also, if you're seeking input on good cause, I think you need to go back to Ms. King and Ms. Kreider as well, because they both requested time extensions.
Okay. Are Ms. King and Mr. and Mrs. Kreider still with us on the WebEx?
Have unmuted your mic.
Wait, oh. Well,
You are unmuted.
yes, hello?
Yes, Ms. King?
Mayor Howe, go ahead. We hear you.
Okay, we're giving you an opportunity to state your reasons for needing more time to get
The
your written
reason-
comments into us.
Right, right. Oh, I have the written comments in for the coalition. Some of the members tonight that spoke said they needed a little more time for, kind of, I believe probably to wrap around their specific specificity with OERs and ORSs or something. So I asked for more time, maybe by tomorrow, the end of your meeting even, that, you know, they could get that part in and submit that in writing to supplement their verbal tonight. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. King. Are Mr. or Mrs. Kreider?
That was Mrs. Kreider.
Oh, that was Mrs. Kreider. Sorry. Okay.
Wendy here.
Is Ms.
Yes, Wendy.
You know,
Thank you, Wendy. You are unmuted.
okay, thank you. You know, it wasn't until I heard someone else speak today about the site conditions and the fish and wildlife that I realized that it actually impacted our farm, potentially impacted our farm. And at that point, I realized I had not sufficiently studied this. I only studied it in terms of the expanded site boundary and all those implications. And so, is good cause ignorance?
What, is that a question? Ms. King,
Yes.
could you clarify your last sentence there?
Oh, I just, it was kind of like I was, agreeing with Counselor Byer. And, when another comment was made during this public comment period about the site conditions, that were being adjusted, the original site certificate, that I realized that that too might impact our family farm. And it wasn't until then that I realized those may have implications as well. So, that's on me if that was the reasoning for me not having enough time because I didn't study those. I didn't think they really applied. And so, that is my ignorance. And I don't know if that is, cause for giving me extended time.
Okay, thank you, Ms. King. Okay, council. Quick discussion. Where are we at for whether there's good cause to extend timelines? And remember, there's timelines that are down the road from tonight to the applicant, to staff, and to everything. It domino effect. Vice Chair Condon.
Thank you, Cindy Condon, for the record. And I have not said this, but thank you so much to everyone who testified tonight, came and gave voice, because that does just provide a whole lot of context and input to our work. I would be inclined to extend till the end of tomorrow, our meeting tomorrow. And I know staff is probably just gritting their teeth about it. But I do think we have an issue with things that are stated at a hearing that people ruminate about. And I think we should consider that. And so I would certainly be open to holding the record open for a day.
Councilor Byer.
This is Counselor Byer. I agree with Vice Chair Condon. And I know we are concerned about setting precedent of just having rolling deadlines, and that is not the intent here. The intent is to give a very short window for people who have expressed an interest in submitting additional information. And at this point, it will be written. And by limiting it till close of business tomorrow, which I think is May 31st, we put a limit on it. And again, I would recommend that our notices of public hearings include the caveat that we may have to limit time. So we give that fair notice going forward. Thank you.
Any other comments? Mr. Chairman. Councilor Devlin.
Obviously, there may be an issue here as to justification, but if the council feels like, a simple day extension, I'm not going to have a problem with that. I would just say that I doubt that a person out there is going to track our meeting. Theoretically, we're supposed to be over about 11:30 or noon tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
It would be better just to set a time right now so that
I
people
agree.
hear it, and just perhaps the regular close of business, which would be 5 p.m. And of course, we have to extend the time for the applicant for additional time to respond to those comments. And
Do we need a motion?
I have a question,
Yeah.
Chair.
Councilor Hines.
Does the department have any input into this decision at this time? On the, verbal input.
So just for clarification, the next agenda item, so we still have another public hearing tonight.
Yep.
That we have to go through. That comment period doesn't end until next week. And so we have that one on the agenda also for the council's review of the DPO. We don't expect the same level of comments on that one. So, I mean, I think, if it was tomorrow at noon, end of the council meeting, end of the business day, I think that's fine. That gives us at least the ability, gives the applicant the ability. The applicant can request, additional time to respond depending upon the volume of the comments. But I think from at least staff standpoint, and I'll speak for staff, I think through tomorrow would be fine. I think if you start going further and further, then, then as Chair Howe said, then there definitely will be a domino effect.
You want to suggest that the time there respond.
Yeah, Councilor Rowe had talked about the timeframe for Idaho Power to respond. I think we leave it still at the end of the day on Monday, and they can have the ability to request. And what we have in there is request from staff, not council. So I think you delegate to us that ability to extend that out if they come back to us and request additional time.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
And I'll look to Patrick. I mean, I think, for my preference, if basically you just have sort of acknowledgement that that's what you want to do, but I'll look to Patrick to see if he wants to have a formal vote on it.
I think it's fine if you acknowledge that that's what if you have concerns about it, then let's talk about it. But if you're okay with that approach, then you don't need to vote on it.
Let me see if there's head nods for that. Okay, it looks like we're
End of business day tomorrow?
in,
That's what we're talking about?
yeah. 5 o'clock tomorrow, May 31st. And as previously, I'm going to move on now. As previously stated, the comment deadline is the close of the public hearing tonight, but we're changing it till 5 o'clock tomorrow. The certificate holder will be given until Monday, June 3rd at 5 to provide responses to comments. However, if requested by the certificate holder, the department's authorized to grant them additional time to respond. So does the certificate holder wish to provide any responses tonight?
We do. Joe Stipple, Idaho Power, 1221 West Idaho Street. Laptop died, so I got to go off my phone here and make sure I don't forget anything. Thank you, council. Thank you, staff, for the preparation of RFA 2. I know a lot of work went into it. So I think there's a lot of confusion around exactly what we're trying to accomplish with the expanded site boundary. We're proposing the expanded site boundary to be a quarter mile on either side of the center line of the transmission line corridor to really facilitate negotiations with landowners. This change will allow IPC to work with landowners and accommodate change during the construction process. As you know, Boardman to Hemingway is a 300-mile long transmission line, and things will come up during construction. And it's a key energy corridor, energy pipeline for to bring renewable energy from the northwest to Idaho and from Idaho to the northwest. So to clarify, the original site boundary really is a micrositing corridor. So we can move project features anywhere inside that based on engineering as we develop final engineering, work with landowners and that sort of thing. What we're proposing is to have an expanded site boundary and changing the original site boundary to become the micrositing corridor. So that doesn't change. When we have this expanded site boundary, which is that quarter mile from the center line of the transmission on either side, it allows Idaho Power to move a project feature with landowner support only. We're not going to move that without agreement from the landowner. But we also have to do all the required studies ahead of time, which include biological and cultural studies. From there, once we have a proposed move into that expanded site boundary, we would then develop the amendment determination request with, and send that into staff at the Oregon Department of Energy. From there, if that change is substantive enough, an amendment is required, we'll evaluate where we are. The goal here is to be able to accommodate landowner changes and evaluate if they're minor enough in change. If we're moving, a common scenario, we're working with a landowner, they ask us to move an access road because it's better for their farm, it minimizes their impact. If we would have to go through an entire amendment process, that's, as you can see from our previous timeline, that's a lengthy timeline. And there'll be many of those that might come up. So what we're trying to do is, if it's minor in nature, we've done the studies, we prove that it's similar impact, same habitat, we've proven there's no resources that are impacted, then it just makes sense for the project and for the landowner. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to accommodate landowner requests. And if something happens during construction where we have to make a minor change onto a road, if we would move, for example, 10 feet outside the site boundary, and you can look at it, you can say this is similar impact, because we're moving that area just 10 feet outside the site boundary, an amendment would be required. With this new process, we would be able to do an amendment determination request, show that it's minimal impact, and we could move ahead with construction and keep our construction timeline. So I really just want to clarify what this does and what it doesn't do. So, right, it allows us to continue to work with landowners and work to negotiations to gain easements. It doesn't grant us any sort of condemnation rights. We're not going to condemn in this expanded site boundary. It'll allow us to keep construction on schedule. This is a vital project to the Northwest, as I stated earlier. And it'll really allow us to minimize our impacts and minimize the burden on doing multiple amendments for minor changes. What it doesn't allow us to do is we can't just build wherever we want in the site boundary without approval. We can't avoid studies. We can't avoid determining exactly what the impacts are. We still have to go through that process. It doesn't allow Idaho Power to force changes on landowners. Right now, where the line is shown is where we intend to build it. We're not going to be this expanded site boundary is going to be, I see it mostly for access roads, right? That is probably the most common use of this, unless we can reach an agreement with the landowner to change a route. Really, I think the goal of this is to promote flexibility during construction on a very complex project. And I do want to comment a little bit, right now on blasting, I believe, we do not intend to do any sort of foundation blasting based on our current construction plans, but we are trying to leave that open, and we would have to gain approval with the department on a blasting plan if we decide we need to do blasting based on the soils that we encounter during construction. Comments on, individual negotiations with landowners, those we don't really discuss publicly because those are between us and that party, and they are complex and really outside the jurisdiction of ODOE and FSEC. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Sipple. Okay, it is 7:38 on Monday, on May 30th, 2024, and the public hearing on the draft proposed order for the Boardman to Hemingway request for Amendment 2 is not closed. The hearing's closed, but the record's left open until 5 o'clock tomorrow. So we're behind schedule significantly. What, do people want to do a 10-minute break? Okay, 10-minute break. We'll come back at 7:50. Okay, it is now 7:50. The next agenda is for the Wagon Trail Solar Project draft proposed order public hearing, and will include an information portion provided by Senior Siting Analyst Chase McVeigh Walker who will provide a brief overview of the agenda item and the request, and a public hearing in which I will serve as a presiding officer. Mr. McVeigh Walker, please proceed with the information portion of the agenda item.
Thank you very much, Chair Howe, and good evening to you and the members of the council. For the record, my name is Chase McVeigh Walker. I'm a senior siting analyst with the Oregon Department of Energy. Nancy, could you go next slide, please? As Chair Howe mentioned, for tonight's agenda item B, I will be providing you with an overview of the proposed Wagon Trail Solar Project, as well as a summary of the energy facility siting process for an application for a site certificate. And then we'll hand off the presentation to Chair Howe, who will serve as the presiding officer for the DPO public hearing portion of this agenda item. Council's review of the DPO, including comments on the DPO, is anticipated to occur at the June council meeting. So that's the next step. We're bifurcating the review of the DPO and the public hearing. The applicant tonight will have an opportunity to provide and or present their comments on the DPO, and will also have an opportunity to respond to any comments received at the hearing tonight. In addition, because the comment period deadline is next Friday, June the 7th, the department requests that council hold the record open for the applicant to respond to comments received by the deadline until 5 o'clock Pacific time on Monday, the 10th, to allow for them to have an opportunity to respond to any comments received by the deadline. And lastly, council also has the opportunity tonight to provide comments on the DPO and on the ASC. An overview of the Energy Facility Siting Council. I'll keep it brief as Kellen has already gone over this, but the Energy Facility Siting Council is a 7-member volunteer governor appointed Oregon Senate approved group council, and the Oregon Department of Energy's Siting Division serves as staff to council, while ODO staff makes recommendations to the Energy Facility Siting Council or FSEC. It's FSEC themselves, yourselves, that is the final decision-making authority for energy facilities under FSEC jurisdiction, including the proposed Wagon Trail Solar Project. Next slide, please. Which brings me to a brief overview of the proposed project. The Wagon Trail Solar Project is a proposed up to 500 megawatt solar photovoltaic energy generation facility proposed by Wagon Trail Energy Center LLC, which is a wholly owned subsidiary of NextEra Energy Resources LLC. The facility is proposed to be sited within a site boundary of 7,450 acres, all of which would be in Morrow County and within exclusive farm use zoned area, privately owned exclusive farm use zone. Of that 7,450 acres within the site boundary, the proposed facility would permanently occupy 3,641 acres, so less than the proposed site boundary. And related or supporting facility components include up to 500 megawatts lithium ion energy storage, and that would be sited in 2 different locations, a northern battery storage component and then a southern one, as well as 2 collector substations, a northern and a southern, 34.5 kilovolt collection system, 0.6 miles of 230 kV transmission line and also up to 47 miles of access roads. Next slide, please. Now I'm getting into the process steps. There's 7 major steps in the review of applications for site certificates. I'd like to emphasize that we're currently at the draft proposed order step, which is the 4th step of the 7. The first is the applicant's notice of intent, which is their conceptual plan, if you will. The notice of intent is reviewed by the department, and the department issues a project order, which is the blueprint for the application. It dictates what the applicable requirements are and would be. Following the project order, the department receives a preliminary application for site certificate from the applicant, and through reviewing agency coordination and coordination with the public via a public information meeting, the department reviews the preliminary application for completeness, and ultimately, once completeness is reached, a complete application is provided to the department, which is where the recommended findings in the draft proposed order are based off of, is the complete application. Following the draft proposed order, the department and following the public hearing and FSEC's review of the draft proposed order, the next step in the process is the proposed order, and that's staff's revised recommendations based on comments received. If there's a contested case, that's a step following the proposed order, and only those persons who have raised a relevant issue in person at the public hearing tonight or in writing by the comment deadline, which is next Friday, June the 7th, may participate in the contested case. And the contested case process step is run by an independent hearing officer. Following the contested case process, should there be one, is FSEC's review of a contested case order, if there is one, or review of the proposed order, and the issuance of a final order which approves or denies the application for site certificate. This slide represents the procedural history for the Wagon Trail Solar Project. The department received the applicant's notice of intent in November of 2020. Following receipt of the notice of intent, an amended notice of intent was provided to the department in June of 2021. And in August of 2022, the department received from the applicant the preliminary application for site certificate. In January of this year, the applicant provided the preliminary application was deemed complete, and the applicant provided a complete application for site certificate. And just earlier this month, the department issued its draft proposed order on May 7th. And today, as highlighted and indicated here in red, we're at the draft proposed order public hearing. And the next step in this procedural history table is the close of the public comment period, which is next Friday, June the 7th. Following close of the comment period, and we anticipate FSEC's review of the DPO and of public comments to occur at the next council meeting, which is June the 14th. As I just mentioned, on May the 7th, concurrent with the department's issuance of the DPO, a notice which included information on the ASC, the public comment period, ways to submit comments, and public hearing details was issued by the department. And anyone who wants to participate beyond this point in the FSEC process must raise an issue on the record either in person or remotely today at the public hearing, or by submitting a written comment to the department before the deadline, which is next week, Friday, June the 7th at 5 p.m. Pacific time. Want to reiterate that failure to raise a relevant issue, either orally today at the hearing or in a timely manner submitted before the deadline, precludes further participation in the FSEC process. Persons interested in being considered for party status in the contested case proceeding must meet a couple criteria. The first relates to timing. To be eligible to participate in a contested case on this application, a person must raise an issue either in person tonight at the public hearing or in a written comment submitted before the deadline of June the 7th, 5 p.m. Pacific. The council will not accept comments after the close of the record at the conclusion after the close of the record. The other two criteria relate to content of comments. For consideration in the contested case, issues raised must be within the council's jurisdiction and must be raised with sufficient specificity so that the council, the department, and the applicant understand the issue raised and are afforded an opportunity to respond to the issue. To raise an issue with sufficient specificity, a person must present facts that support the person's position on the issue. And with that, I think I'm ready to turn it over to you, Chair Howe.
This is a public hearing on the draft proposed order on the request for a site certificate for the Wagon Trail Solar Project. I, Kent Howe, Energy Facility Siting Council Chair, am serving as a presiding officer for this hearing. Today is May 30th, 2024. The time is 8:02 p.m. This public hearing is being held at an Energy Facility Siting Council meeting in person here in the Riverfront Room at the Port of Morrow in Boardman. This hearing is also being held via a WebEx webinar with a call-in option for those who cannot participate in person or via webinar. Tonight's hearing is being recorded. The presentations, written comments, and oral testimony are part of the decision record for the request for the facility. The purpose of the public hearing is to provide an opportunity for the public reviewing agencies, council, and the applicant, if they wish to do so, to present oral and written testimony on the request and the department's draft proposed order. The 31-day record of the public hearing comment period on the draft proposed order includes the hearing tonight and is scheduled to close next Friday, June 7th, 2024 at 5 p.m. Pacific time. Pursuant to OAR 345-015-0220, sub 5A and B, please note the following. A person who intends to raise any issue that may be the basis for a contested case must raise the issue in person at the hearing or in written comment submitted to the department before the deadline stated in the notice of the public hearing. And B, a person who intends to raise any issue that may be the basis for a contested case must raise the issue with sufficient specificity to afford the council, the department, and the applicant an adequate opportunity to respond, including a statement of facts that support the person's position on the issue. Hearing format. Yeah, so this slide presents the order for tonight's hearing and testimony on the record of the DPO. First, the certificate holder, then members of the public, then members of the council. Finally, the certificate holder will be allowed to respond to any comments. If attendees wish to submit written comments at the hearing to staff, they may do so. I will call on each person interested in providing oral testimony, starting with the certificate holder, and then members of the public here in person, and then onto the webinar, and then onto the phone. For any individuals wishing to provide oral testimony during tonight's hearing, for the record, please state the following with your testimony. full name with spelling, name of organization or group if you're representing one, and the physical mail or email address. So is the applicant here tonight, and do they wish to provide testimony?
Hi, my name is Ryan Hill. That's RyanHill. I'm representing the Wagon Trail Solar Project. I just want to say thank you to the council for coming out here, spending your time to review our application. Thank you to Chase for all the good communication, and thank you to the public for coming out and, you know, having interest in our project and other projects similar.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Before I open the hearing up to public testimony, I want to remind the public that prior to the close of the record, you may submit written testimony in a variety of ways: the comment portal, email, and handing in your written comment tonight. I'd like to get a sense of the number of people interested in testifying to determine if I need to set time limits. I've got 3 here. Could you raise your hand if there's any more that want to? Looks like 1, 2, 5. Okay, so maybe 5. And do we know how many are on the phone and on the WebEx?
I've got one person with their hand raised.
Okay. Same time? 5 minutes? Okay. So with that, we're ready for Ms. Tamara Mabbutt.
Nice to see you. Okay, have you started the clock yet? Okay, very exciting. I don't often get to sit on this side of the table, so it's very exciting. Thank you, Chair Howe and members of the Siting Council and staff. My name is Tamara Mabbutt. I'm the Morrow County Planning Director. Today, I just want to briefly summarize. Morrow County is very supportive of this project, and we've submitted comments, I believe, 3 times formally into the record. And the Board of Commissioners will consider an additional letter the next time they meet, which will be Wednesday, June 5th. Again, the county is very supportive of the process. What I want to call to your attention tonight is this complicated conundrum with a Goal 3 exception. I think this is the time to get it right and set a good precedent. I think your staff has it correct in their analysis of Goal 3. They reference a Court of Appeals case about whether or not Goal 13, compliance with Goal 13, is sufficient reason to justify Goal 3, and they concluded it does not, and we would agree with that. I spent the day today with some of your agency counterparts, Department of Land Conservation and Development, and the entire day was looking at solar siting rules. We had a lot of discussion about Goal 5, protection of other resources, and balancing that with Goal 3. I think the process works for the most part. And in the past, most recently with the Oregon Supreme Court ruling in favor of the state and the Siting Council, where you did not implement local standards, I think this is a time when you can agree that there is an appropriate place for local government. The staff, I think, has done a good job recommending some mitigation to offset some of the impacts to removing farmland from production. I'm just not sure that that's the right formula. And what I would like to see, and I expect the Board of Commissioners will have it in some formal written letter next week, is that we maybe make that a little bit more formal instead of off the cuff. So we have another solar development in Morrow County. They've taken great steps to quantify that impact. And they also work very closely with staff and our elected officials. We have a formal agreement their application will come before you rather soon. That gives the county the comfort that that exact number is the correct number. And this one seemed not completely arbitrary, but it's not as quantifiable as another project. So again, Morrow County is very supportive of this. It's really good business for the underlying farmers and the landowners. We just think that there is so much to be considered by setting a precedent with goal 3. We'd encourage you to think about that and maybe give some direction to staff and the developer to formalize that mitigation program. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Thank you, Ms. Mabott.
Thank you.
Cameron Krebs.
Thank you, Chairman. Oh, sorry.
You have the floor.
All right, thank you, Chairman. My name is Cameron Krebs, Cameron, Krebs, Krebs, spelled on the bottom of the sheet, included with my email that's being passed out right now. I live here in Boardman. I am a resident of Morrow County. I'm a 5th generation livestock producer in Morrow County. Today, my comments are neutral in your guys' decision on citing Wagon Wheel Trail Solar and any future solar projects in the future. I come forth as a resident of this community that lives here and drinks the water here, and I ask that we cite these solar farms with the highest environmental standard going forward. Presented to you today is by the 6th generation of my family, is what I see out there on the landscape. We have solar farms that are being sited with a bare earth approach. Since the Dust Bowl, our government has strived to incorporate organic matter and residual residue on our soils to incorporate clean water infiltration, protect from wind erosion, as well as water runoff and discharge. The useful life of a solar farm is 50 years. What is 50 years of continuous chemical use going to do to our local challenges, including our current groundwater issues that we face? I think there are honest, great solutions as presented in evidence below that we can cite these solar farms on our landscape in the Columbia Basin that have the resilience, that provide habitat, that provide clean water infiltration into our upland watersheds and protect our local communities. One of my major concerns is that in the permit, there is currently no talk about harvesting out any of the nitrates in the farmland. Second, is that the noxious weed plan is, although addressed, I would think that would be an excellent place that we stabilize the soil profile before we go into construction of solar farms for its long-term impacts. And that would reduce the control and spread of noxious weeds, aid in the control of noxious weeds, and reduce the spread and opportunity for them to flourish on this landscape. Second, I could not find in the 320 pages, except on page 110, which is actually in the Goal 3 exemption, where it stated what the site was going to be like post-construction in the operational phase. We have a very delicate ecosystem here. We only get a limited amount of rainfall. We need to collect every drop we can and ensure that it gets transferred into our watersheds cleanly. The fire provision section states that it's a 5-foot minimum fire break. And as you guys know, when the Sherman County fire, the fatal fire 2 years ago came, it easily was jumping roads across that entire landscape. The Dot fire last year in adjoining Klickitat County moved considerable miles in a matter of minutes. 5-foot minimum fire break around a site that's generating energy is not sufficient. I would encourage you to enlarge that. Second, I think we can change the design of these solar farms in our dry arid ecosystem to make them more resilient to fire, to protect those that live on the edges and our infrastructure that's outside of the solar facilities. Lastly is the Goal 3 exemption. I think it's, I would like to ask that the gift or the allocated offset to the Goal 3, which is a $170,000 gift to OSU with very specific dryland wheat research earmarked, be stricken and opened up to agrivoltaics. Goal 3 is to keep agricultural land in agriculture. There is a wonderful opportunity to study the opportunities that exist in agrivoltaics going forward into the future. There is going to be more permits in front of you guys coming forward. I think solar development in the Columbia Basin is relatively new. We have made some mistakes in the past. I think there's a wonderful opportunity to really build solar farms, if we're going to site them out here, that are resilient, that improve our ecological system, that provide habitat for our birds, our nesting birds, our migratory birds, and continue to keep our vibrant agricultural community alive. Thank you guys for your time today, and I would be happy to take any questions that you might have. Second, I do want to state for the record, we currently operate a company called Krebs Solar Grazing. It's listed there. Any perceived beneficial interest, I'm trying to declare that. I'm here today because I don't believe we should have bare earth in my county. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Krebs. Any questions? Vice Chair Condon?
Thank you. Cindy Condon for the record. Thank you for being here and being so passionate. Question for you with respect to the Goal 3 exemption in the Oregon State allocation. I just want to make sure I understand what you're suggesting is that it not just be for dryland wheat, but also be for photovoltaic agrivoltaics, or no dryland wheat and only.
Thank you. Whoever established where that money, how much money was coming, which I think was previously stated, and where it should go to be the offset, I wasn't involved in. But what I know today is that if we're going to offset removing of farmland, that there are models of agrivoltaics that can be developed that would make a more logical sense in my mind to allocate OSU to use the money in what they see as the best interest. That future might be dryland wheat research breeds for the land we do have left, but it also could be to support the new emerging industry of agrivoltaics, whether that's pollinator habitat, understanding vegetative response to daylight stress and nutrient uptakes, or livestock grazing, and or beyond. And that's what I'm asking, that the gift be, or the amount can be considered to be more broad spectrum of what the future of the county is going to need from our ag extension.
Thank you for that. And do you have written comment? Or is it just oral comments here?
Currently today, it's only oral comments. I struggle to get my passion into writing.
We did get this.
And that was submitted to the record. So on the last thing, the two solar farms are 38.6 miles apart. Thank you for your time.
Just share, can you hold on one second?
Yes, sir.
If you'd allow me, I do have a question.
Absolutely.
So for the record, Todd Cornett, you had mentioned nitrate harvesting.
Yeah.
Did I get that correctly?
Yes.
So I'm not familiar with that term, and since, in case you don't put it on the record, it would be helpful for me to understand exactly what that means.
Well, I'm not certain it has an official definition, but as I define it, the top foot of our agricultural ground that has been in production dryland wheat should be checked and compared to our native rangeland. And if there is a significant difference in nitrogen, then we should look at extracting that nitrogen from the soil to stabilize it as we go into the operational years of the solar farm. My concern is that if we have one of the reseeding mitigation protocols is to reseed to its pre-established use. If it was dryland wheat fallow, its pre-established use would be fallow. So now we add rainwater to bare earth, the nitrogens can only go one way, and that's down. So I'm just asking that we look at this picture and we try to create an ecological system underneath the solar panels that is healthy for our landscape and providing ecological benefit. Last thing, I breathe oxygen, so do you. That only comes from photosynthesis. So why can't we catch sunlight to charge our cell phones and grow grass to make oxygen? Somewhere in there, there's got to be a better balance than bare earth. Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Sam Myers.
Thank you, Sam Myers, 68453 Little Butter Creek Road, Hepner, Oregon. Yeah, I appreciate it. I too am super concerned about the ground contamination. It's difficult for me to fathom that that has not been fully addressed. I talked to multiple developers who could not answer that question. What happens when a fire moves into a solar array? What's left on the ground? If you guys can't, if you don't know the answer to that, then there's, I don't know what's to talk about, because it's like, it's a abject failure. It's a dereliction of pursuit to put solar panels in this area of Morrow County, especially central Morrow County. Because there's going to be a fire come through at some point. And if you don't know what's going to be left on the ground, if the ground is unproducible because it's so toxic, that the plants will absorb the toxicity and make the seeds dangerous to consume. And you've just ruined a fire that size. It's going to be so difficult to fight because you're dealing with panels everywhere. It would be a responder's nightmare. If you don't know what a fire is going to do in this array, in this area, then you have no business discussing this as a renewable energy. I was approached by multiple developers wanting to do this. And as soon as they couldn't answer that question, I said, hey, I think I'm out. Not to mention the absurd subsidies that they were getting. Everybody should know this is just a sham. He said, what do you want? What do you want per acre per year? He said, what do you want? I said, I don't know. I'll take the current panel dollar figure and I'll multiply it by 3. So I said, $1,200 per acre per year. He's like, I think I can do that. I'm like, wow. So this is all coming through the Biden administration's infrastructure bill. And I'm like, wow, what a waste to support something this strong that produces this little amount of electricity and potentially can damage the soil. But then, have you ever looked at the Oregon Department of Ag's website, how they're screaming about acres being taken away from agriculture? It's like, do any of the agencies actually communicate back and forth? They're literally saying this is a wreck. We're losing too many acres, too many valuable cropland acres. But the ODOE over here is trying to get this all thousands of acres used for solar. So I don't get it. I don't get it. I don't understand the push. I too thought about this agrivoltaic. So, well, hey, let's try to configure a combination of cropland use where you have supported panel arrays, you farm underneath it. And so you maintain a more balance between the potential for weeds to be out of control. You still can generate some electricity, but everything has to be it's a very specific sort of landscape I'm talking about. So I shared that with one of the developers. He's like, I can't do that. And he goes, I know what you're talking about. I can't do that. I really don't have it's too complex. It's too much money to set up a field that has rows of arrays, but you actually can farm successfully in between those. That's too far in the future for what I need to do today. So I hope this makes sense to you, because it doesn't make sense to me how we could strip farmland from producing what the world needs. And then we could also put it in jeopardy of long-term soil destruction from contamination from whatever's in Now, not that I know that that's for sure, but that nobody could assure me there weren't risks with what comes out of and drips down from a fire, nor could they tell me what would happen in the hail event that we had, in 95, I believe, we had a hailstorm that took down a lot of crops. Saw an Instagram post where it destroyed a solar array. So there you go. It's like, how short could this 2,000 acre solar farm be lifespan potentially? I don't know, but I appreciate you guys so much. I really didn't come here intending to do this, but I have firsthand experience and have thought about this. And we're like, this is financially more than we would ever make for a second on dryland wheat. But I'm like, I can't be the generation that puts something on our soil that damages it. I don't want to be that. I don't want to make that mistake.
Thank you, Mr. Myers.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Anyone else in the audience wanting to testify tonight? Come on forward. State your name and address, please.
Cam, don't go anywhere. I want to talk about your grazing. Chris Roush, R-A-U-C-H, 72967 Strawberry Lane, Lexington, Oregon. I represent Northlex Power and Land and Starvation Farms. So I may be the resident expert here because I do live in the middle of the Wagon Trail Solar Farm. They're out my front door and my back door, and if I had another door, it'd be out there too. So on the issue of fire, well, first thing I want to say, if you're a landowner, get involved with your developer, which is what I do. I take the first step. We've had all these discussions about what they brought up tonight, actually, and we keep working on them all the time. As far as fire, at least on the development that's on our place at this moment, the developer has more to worry about fire from me than I do from them. Bare ground doesn't burn, but I got wheat fields all around it. They'll burn. And we've had this discussion of future development, what to do, some things about fire breaks, erosion, gravel roads, things like that. We can get in more detail if you need to. The other thing was, God dang it, all the fire breathing, weeds. So we do work proactively on the weeds. Weeds aren't usually an issue. Unless you let grow stuff in there, then yeah, they could become an issue. That comes with a two-edged sword. If you have a bunch of grass in there, not only can weeds get in there, they may not if you're doing your job, but it also increases the fire risk on both sides of the fence then. Now, I'm not opposed to having grass into those things, but in the right circumstances, and I do have places that do that, but you can work with your developer. Lastly, I can just say is, as your resident expert, if you got questions, fine. Otherwise, let's build the son of a bitch and go. Okay.
Okay, thank you for your testimony. Anybody else in the room wishing to testify? Okay, let's, Nancy, could you check WebEx?
Miss Kelly Hale has her hand raised. Miss Hale, I have unmuted your mic. You are ready to comment.
Hi, thank you. First of all, I want to say thank you to the Energy Siting Council. My comments tonight are in support of Wagon Trail Solar. My name is Kelly Hale, K-E-L-L-Y, last name Hale, H-A-L-E. And I am a co-trustee with my brother Russell Kilkenny on the Kilkenny Trust. The first year of operation after Dad's passing, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. The first year of operation after Dad's passing in 2016, when we just had farm ground, we basically had no return on the investment. The ground is a very fine silty loam soil. We have no access to water, nor will we have any access to water. The average yield in that area is close to 30 bushels to the acre. The price of wheat in 1975 was similar to what it is this year. Land values are roughly $500 an acre for our ground versus irrigated ground, which is roughly $12,000 an acre. The first year after the turbine installation gave us roughly a return on investment of about 15%. It allowed us to increase acreage. As a matter of fact, we let our CRP contracts expire, and that increased farmable ground on our property of another 700 acres. We've seen a net gain in production from our relationship with NextEra. They have been extremely productive partners. They've paid to clean up our property. They're incredible stewards of the land. Also, they've been very good to Morrow County. They provided additional jobs and also sponsorships to local events. I just want to say thank you in advance for any support you might give to this project.
Thank you, Ms. Hale.
Thank you.
Let us go through the rest first. Nancy, any others on the WebEx?
There are no other hands raised at this time.
Why don't you check the phone then?
I have no phone-ins right
No
now.
phone. Okay, make it quick.
It concerns the money that we're talking about on OSU.
Yeah.
Oh, Chris Roush again, like Strawberry Lane, Lexington, Oregon. It was brought up about the OSU Goal 3 stuff.
Yeah.
And the reason that's hit dry land is because farming, because that's where the stuff's being taken out of. It's hitting to the dry land farming. And so all that's directed to is research on farming, trying to be more productive. And then I think there may be some money actually going towards, I could be off, I better not say that. I'll let them talk about, but there could be some other money directed to something else that could help the farmers there too. So that's why it's hit it that way.
Yeah.
It's on range ground, then yeah, look at it.
Okay, thank you. Are there any council members that would like to provide comments to the department or the certificate holder? Councilor Byer.
Thank you all for coming out this evening, and just to staff, I'll be really interested to see the Morrow County letter on the Goal 3 exception, and I know Odo staff has worked really hard on trying to understand mitigation for loss, and not even total loss, but for this change of use of farm grounds. So I think we're all working to try to understand what the best mitigation looks like in this situation. So thank you all.
Thank you, Councilor Byer. Anyone else? Councilor Imes?
Thank you, Chair. Katie Imes for the record. And I do have some comments regarding the wildfire mitigation plan. Specifically Exhibit V, Attachment V1 on page 11. There's some comments in here about the plan will be updated by the applicant every 5 years. And so I have some concern about that. Our last public meeting, we talked quite a bit about wildfire mitigation plans and striving for a more cohesive approach so that we see these plans becoming just better, I guess, in general, and also better, more frequent inspections. And I did see in this one that they had actually put that information in there, so that's great. But again, also want to reiterate that, speaking with the first responders in this area is really, really important. All of those fire districts that are impacted by this project, reaching out to them and also, what their capacity levels are and how are they going to respond to the fire when it happens? Because it will happen. We need to know that they have been engaged, and what their comments are. Because we don't ever get to hear from what I gather so far, I haven't heard from any local fire responders to these matters. So I'm very curious about that. And also wanted to ask, this is more of a question, and I'm not sure who can answer it, but I noticed that the comment period was different on this than the one that we just had. It was 30 days versus 45 days. And again, I'm new here, so I'm still learning what constitutes a 30-day review versus a 45-day review, or comment period, I should say, not review. And if this was an expedited process, because I'm thinking maybe that might be it. Thank you.
Secretary Cornett.
For the record, Todd Cornett, I can certainly take the last one. So I believe the minimum comment period is 21 days. So that's the legal requirement for a draft proposal or comment. I have to go back and verify that, but I think that's probably correct. Beyond that, we never set a 21-day, or I doubt that we've ever set a 21-day, because don't believe that's sufficient to review the complete application or the complete request for amendment and a draft proposed order. But frankly, it's a judgment call on staff's part based upon the proposed project, location, what we've known to date about interest on that project. Boardman to Hemingway, a lot of interest. Therefore, it was, going to be a minimum of 45 days, because that's, based on our experience, we know that there's a lot of interest. And we wanted to make sure people had that opportunity for this project. At the public information meeting, on the notice of intent, at the public information meeting, on the complete application, there was very limited interest, limited participation. That doesn't necessarily mean that at the draft proposed order stage, there would be that same limited participation, but it's likely. And so that's essentially why we chose a lesser time frame than the Boardman to Hemingway.
Any other comments, questions? Vice Chair Condon.
Thank you, Cindy Condon, for the record. And I forgot I did have a question on the wildfire mitigation, and I should have checked on this. It's my memory that the wildfire standard is on ignition. It kind of applies to ignition source, the project being an ignition source. Because you mentioned grassland is more of a problem for fire than the solar facility, it jogged my memory. And I'm just curious, in any of the wildfire mitigation plans that we're looking at or whatnot, is there I haven't seen, and I know I've asked about it before, a notification process for adjacent landowners. Should there be an ignition on a project, is that anticipated in the plan, in mitigation plans? I just don't know enough about the development of those plans.
Thank you, Vice Chair Condon. This is Sarah Esterson, Senior Policy Advisor, for the record. I think that what we're trying to ensure is included in wildfire mitigation plans is an obligation to develop a process for working with emergency responders to notify local landowners, but that the obligation wouldn't be for the certificate holder or the facility personnel to do that notification. So we haven't, because we don't actually have any wildfire mitigation plans that have been finalized or are in place. We're not seeing what that actually looks like. What is the process they've developed? But the plans say you've got to develop a process.
Thank you. And I know you've been working on it. And so just as that develops through the process, I'm interested in adjacent property owners and the protection of their property in timely, embers do fly pretty quickly. And so what are the mitigation efforts for those adjacent? And so I was just looking for that information. Thank you.
No problem.
Councilor Byer.
Vice Chair Condon, I think we added a condition to the Obsidian project, one of the amendments that we've been trying to include on other projects for that coordination with the local responders, knowing that the local responders probably have better access to property records than the developer would, and would have a system perhaps in place to notify those adjacent property owners. I know in Deschutes County, you can get text alerts for wildfire smoke, all sorts of police activities. So there are different mechanisms to do those property owner notifications. And I think as we start to see mitigation plans, maybe there'll be a model that other developers can adopt, but we want to make sure that that language is in every condition we put under the wildfire standards, that we expect that coordination.
Just to follow up to that. And yes, I do remember that we talked about it and had it as a condition. It's just as we see more and more plans, yeah, I'd like developers to think about, okay, what's our responsibility for it? Because like I said, the embers travel quickly, and I don't know what the timing for even knowledge of an incident, and then now engaging with the local fire. I don't know enough about it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And there's a potential for at least one, potentially three in the next 6 months where we would actually see the outcome of what this means. What is the plan for that landowner communication? And we can bring that back to you.
Thank you.
Councilor Devlin.
This is a very general question, Mr. Chairman, maybe to staff.
Mike.
I'm waiting for an answer. I've been noticing, I believe the developers are very cognizant of the fire issues, but I've been seeing in the last probably year and a half, more of the proposals coming in with more of the potential, some of them are not transmission lines, but power lines being underground compared to proposals from a couple of years back. Are you generally seeing that? And I think that's a recognition of the way to minimize the chances of fire is to put power lines underground, particularly given what litigation there's been in western states on this issue.
Well, I don't want to speak for NextEra, but I thought that they actually have a policy for 34.5 kV lines that are there underground.
Yeah.
We haven't dealt with high voltage underground proposals yet.
Yeah. But I was seeing more lines being put underground changed.
Any other comments? Okay. As previously stated, the comment deadline is June 7th at 5 p.m. The applicant will be given until Monday, June 10th at 5 p.m. Pacific time to provide responses to comments. However, if requested by the certificate holder, the department is authorized to grant them additional time to respond. Does the applicant wish to provide any responses tonight?
Yes, sir. Thank you for the opportunity. Again, this is Ryan Hill with the Wagon Trail Solar Project. And could you go ahead and go to slide 15 that I sent over earlier? Yeah, slide 15. I just kind of want to address some of the comments brought up tonight. Sorry, let me get logged in here. And just kind of talk through our thinking, specifically on the goal 3 exception, but to kind of answer some other things, right? Our noxious weed plan, our fire mitigation plan, those are living documents, right? So we update those when there's a new piece of information, and a larger company like my parent company, NextEra Energy Resources, we're going through pre-construction compliance of a wind project also in Morrow County. And so all the lessons learned that we get from that noxious weed mitigation plan, fire mitigation plan, we bring to our other projects as well. So while you might not have seen those changes for this specific project, they are coming. Additionally, I walked through with the Morrow County emergency manager this week with our operating site, right? Just to get his input on our operating facility, what we could do better, his input, the coordination with the local first responders. And then we went a step further where we brought in our construction superintendents to talk about, hey, what are we doing during construction? What can we do better? You know, how are we going to coordinate with the county if there is an emergency, whether it's fire related or a personal injury, you know, working out all those details. And then additionally, you know, he got to see up close and personal, you know, a battery storage system as well as solar panels and wind turbines. So I think it was a good experience for him. And so we are doing that coordination, and, you know, sometimes all of these plans are pretty detailed, but it's hard to include every little thing we are doing within the county. And the same thing goes for the noxious weed plan. You know, we talk to our neighbors. Chris, he'll let us know if he has an issue for sure. And then, you know, we try to be responsive and correct that issue, as well as working with Corey Sweeney at the weed superintendent for Morrow County as well. It's taking those lessons learned from our operating or further along in the permitting process projects and pulling that to these projects. Like, all these documents are living documents and need to be updated as new information, recommendations from county staff or, you know, subject matter experts comes up to date. And then I know there's a little bit of mystery of our agricultural mitigation plan. So I just kind of want to talk through how we got there and what our thinking was, right? And so just an overview of the land we're using, predominantly not high value farmland. We're not using any irrigated land. It's mostly dry land wheat. And yeah, we are expected to impact about 3,700 acres of that land. Next slide, please. And so here's kind of the reasons for a Goal 3 exception. And just to be clear, I think we fall under that third bullet point for other relevant factors, or what to refer to as reasons, just to be clear. All right, next slide, please. All right, exception is warranted to allow a locationality dependent facility that will fulfill important state and county goals by providing renewable energy and minimizing impacts on local farming practices. And I kind of want to discuss more how we're trying to minimize our impacts on local farming practices. Next slide, please. All right, location dependency, right? We own and operate 2 existing facilities directly adjacent to the Wagon Trail Solar Project, and then we operate a 3rd additional facility there. We were trying to group these projects as close together, one, to not spread out all over the county, all over the land. The closer that we can get all these facilities, you know, the more land there are adjacent to farm around, and we don't have a bunch of little nooks and crannies within the facilities where equipment's not able to access. Additionally, a big factor is having access to transmission interconnection rights, as well as okay, it's cool that you can get your electricity to a utility, but can you actually deliver that power where it's needed? That's also a big constraint that I don't think we've kind of talked about. So there's multiple factors of being able to connect and actually deliver the power where it's needed. Those are 2 different things, and we are set up in this specific location to meet all of those needs. Next slide, please. Yep, and then this is just a visual display of all of our operating projects. So the light green is the Wheat Ridge East Wind Project as it stands now. And then the orange and blue outlines are Wheat Ridge 1 and 2 wind facilities. And as you can see, the Wagon Trail Solar Facility, which is that purple outline, is built right into the kind of the layout of the existing wind facilities. And another benefit of that overlap is we're able to share facilities between 3, in this case, up to 5 different energy facilities, right? So then you have less operation maintenance buildings, less substations, less overhead transmission lines scattered throughout the county. So we're able to share all of those existing facilities and not disturb any more land to get power to the grid. Next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, so talking about our direct and indirect impacts to agriculture. As I said, we're expected to impact around 3,700 acres of arable land, and with no loss to irrigated land. So kind of what does that look like? We had Northwest do a economic impact study of, what pulling this amount of dryland wheat crop really affects the economy. And I think the direct impact is pretty easy to say, right? The landowners that land we're using who farm that land are being compensated via a solar lease, right? They're getting a monetary gain from the use of that land. The hard thing to kind of determine is what about the people who are indirectly affected, whether that's tenant farmers, the local agricultural industry, stores, suppliers. And that's where we kind of really targeted what we're doing, right? And so talk about tenant farmers. We have a great relationship and history, proven history of contracting the tenant farmers whose land we're taking, whether it's due road grading, road improvements. It's not that we are trying to displace them, move on, and not be associated with them. We are just trying to substitute their income with, instead of farming, it would be support of the energy facility. And we have been extremely conscious of that and intend to do so moving forward as well. The other factor, the indirect impacts of developing agricultural land. So through our study, we're expected to impact approximately $487,000 per year of dryland wheat, and that'll be kind of the impact to the agricultural economy. And what we did is we looked at what are we currently doing? Like, what are the real numbers in Morrow County that we are spending? Well, luckily for us, we have the operating solar facility, and we know exactly how much money we're spending, specifically on weed abatement, weed mitigation. So we took that number, got a quote from our same vendor who's located in Morrow, Umatilla County, who purchases his chemicals from Morrow County grain growers and also in Hermiston. And it turns out we were spending more money than the farmers were spending to cultivate that land. And that's based off of numbers that Mr. Roush gave us, as well as the tenant farmer on the other property gave us. So it's like, okay, well, I understand those are not dollar for dollar replacements, right? I think that's like an important acknowledgement to make, but it's also, we are still spending in the economy. We are using local businesses to help us out. And that's where it came from. And so really that $500,000 contribution has nothing to do with offsetting the indirect impacts, so to say, right? Because we have the numbers, we have the proof that we're spending that money in the economy anyway. Really what it came from is listening to the public saying like, hey, there's a need to, help out these other people that you're affecting. Like, what can you do to help us out? So we listened to, really the county initially brought it up to me, and sorry, Tamara, if you feel like I kind of cut you out, but the process I took is I went to the shareholders who were actually affected. So whether that's farmers directly in the location near Northlex, I talked to Chris, talked to Corey Miller, and I said, hey, give me a list of people who would have good ideas to support dryland wheat for everybody in the county, not just people with the project. And so I got a list of probably 5 people. I talked to every single one, and I said, like, how much money do you need, and what would you do with that money? And the people that kind of stuck with me was Larry Lucher at the OSU Extension Office doing dryland wheat research, because, I think one of the best ways we can mitigate our impacts is being more efficient with the acreage we are farming, and that's directly what he's doing, right? And so he gave me a list of equipment he wants. I said, cool, done. I like that idea. Let's do it. And then the next was Morrow County grain growers. I spoke to their GM. I said, like, what do you see a need? And, I think I spoke about the Northlex grain elevator just because it's directly adjacent to our project. They want to put in 3-phase power. They need to do some shotcrete repairs. I don't think our money that we're contributing will fix everything they want, but I think it's a good start. And right, we're operating in the community, and if we need to sponsor another project, we will. It's just not, laid out in writing. And the other aspect we kind of went down was like, how do we want to to do this because one, it had never been done by the time I'm working through this issue. I told Chase, I was like, hey, we need another month. Like we heard there's this need. Obviously, like not to like point out, but there's another project doing the same thing that I'm sure you'll hear about later, and it's already been approved by the county. But like we were like trying to blaze our own path and see, you know, what is the right way to handle this. And what we came to, you know, after talking to the stakeholders is directing the money directly to the people who need it to get it to them quickly, right? We said we want to pay all of it up front. We requested from staff to make it a pre-construction compliance condition, so you know that we are required to make these payments prior to starting construction. And they only called out 470,000, and the commitment we made to the two parties was a total of 500,000. So regardless of what the condition is, we are doing the full $500,000. And that was just kind of like our thinking. So I just wanted to clear that up. I will say, right, it is a new idea, and I tried to be thoughtful and listen to the community on how to get there. The one thing that I didn't do that probably right, like next time around, is maybe get Tamara more involved or go through the, and no like shade to anybody, right, in the county, but it's like, hey, maybe if the county wants to be the administrator of the funds, like figure out a way to make that work. I did not do that for this one just because I thought like, hey, the fastest way that I can get the aid to the people who need it, the people we're affecting, is directly doing it before we disturb any of the land. And so that was our thinking. We're not trying to like go around anybody or anything like that. Next slide, please. Yeah, this just kind of talks about taxes. Like, yeah, we pay our taxes. But the other thing that's like kind of important, right, is the operational jobs that it'll bring, right? Obviously, you have the construction jobs, brings spending in the local economy, but the operational jobs, right? This will give Morrow County 3 to 5 high-paying technical jobs that can then be levied into a career at NextEra or any other energy company, honestly. And then, right, we don't purchase land, we just lease the land, so it will be returned to them at the end of the project. And obviously, right, we submit our decommissioning bond prior to construction, so, you know, we are returning the land to the condition it was before. Next slide, please. Yep, and so we have we've determined through our studies that the facility has minimal impacts to other environmental resources, partially because we are siting some of the facility on dry land wheat, and that is previously disturbed land, right? So that is a balance that we as a developer have to face, right? It's disturbed, potentially endangered species habitat, or build on previously disturbed land, and we do balance that, and you know, we do take those decisions very seriously. Next slide, please. All right, and then just kind of to follow up, in the DPO, department found the facility would, including mitigation, not cause significant adverse environmental consequences or impact, including mitigation, have a beneficial economic impact, would not cause significant adverse social consequences, and would not cause significant adverse energy consequences, and would have a positive energy consequence by producing clean, renewable electricity. Next slide, please. Yep, and we've kind of already stated that. Could you please just go to slide 26? So a big thing for me, right, I'm in the county a lot, so if anybody ever wants to walk through any of the Wheat Ridge facilities, this is my contact information. I'll organize it. I'll be there to walk through. I'll teach you about the technologies. I just like want to be the example of like, we hear feedback, we listen, we take it into account, and we try to get better and do good by the community as well, right? And pending any questions from the council, I think that's all I have. Great job on the slides.
Councilor Condon.
Thank you, Cindy Condon, for the record. And short, it was just nice to hear your, what seems like outreach to the community landowners, and you're working closely with them. It sounds like you're very collaborative. And that's nice to hear here.
Yeah, we are, and it, you know, it's collaborative with the county as well. Like the county is revising their community wildfire protection plan, and I told Steve, like, hey, let me know as soon as you get that done because I want to incorporate our facilities wildfire mitigation plans to fall in line exactly with that. So there's no gaps in either of those plans, right?
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Counselor Devlin.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This may be, you may have already provided the explanation for a question I had. The very significant amount of storage you're building, that's intended then to serve more than this solar farm, correct? Since the facilities are so close together.
So it kind of depends, but ideally it would just be to serve the solar farm, right? I can't speak in like
Okay.
exact specifics, right? But with transmission in Eastern Oregon to getting to the load centers to be as constrained, the more storage you have, you can then, instead of not producing energy with the existing panels, you could store that energy for,
Yeah.
whenever you're not producing to then discharge it, would be the concept of it.
It's just one of the larger percentages of storage that I've seen in an application. So, okay.
Sure.
Any other comments?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hill.
Yep. Thank you all for your time. And I know y'all put a lot of effort into reviewing these applications. I appreciate it.
If there's nothing else for the good of the order, the time is now 9:01 on May 30th, 2024, and the public hearing on the draft proposed order for the Wagon Trail Solar Project is now closed. The public comment period will close on June 7th, 2024 at 5 p.m. And the time is now 9:02, and the May 2024 meeting of the Energy Facility Siting Council is now recessed until tomorrow morning at 8:30.
May we leave stuff here?